new god of North America. Hello again, dear adventurers of the multiverse. Thanks for joining us once more on this epic journey. Remember, this story is pure science fiction from our wild imagination. So don't go trying to summon dragons in your backyard. The rights of this amazing novel belong entirely to its original author. We are only the narrators. Do you want more adventures? Show some love to our YouTube channel with a subscription and a like. And if you want exclusive content, our Patreon is waiting for you with open arms. Chapter 51 Interrogation. Wayne and Inessa's current suspect was the rancher who ranked second among the cult's followers. Wayne, however, was more imaginative. He connected the dots to the story of the master of the bathhouse. If the divine messenger can't be found outside, could it be that someone in the organization actually holds a dual identity? Following this line of thought, the second-in-command becomes very prominent. Looking at the records, the divine messenger clearly had a growth curve. Over a decade ago, when he first recruited members, he relied on the so-called lucky potion, which involved drugging opponents to increase the gambler's winning rate. By the time Mr. Greenspan joined, the divine messenger was already using various insects to cause trouble. When Wayne and his group encountered him, he directly attacked using insect monster avatars. At least technically, he seemed to have improved considerably. Looking back at the initial recruit, the gambler who became the #1 member, his faith in US dollars was clearly deeper than his faith in the evil god. He initially got involved entirely because he was lured in by the so-called lucky potion. This aligns with Mr. Greenspan's previous assessment, that the divine messenger should have had a very high status, and initially had few development targets to choose from. Otherwise, there would have been no need to recruit some incompetent members in the first place. The initial believers had no choice, and his abilities were probably not strong enough at that time. Therefore, the messenger of God may have had to take on a dual identity, acting as a companion to keep the gambler in check. Learning from his mistakes, he waited many years, until 7 years ago when he recruited his third member, finally bringing in the later very capable Dr. John. It's a bit like he leveled up, carefully selected his followers, polished his script, and then tricked them into joining. Moreover, the second brother is particularly clean, no problems have been found in his family, and his family hasn't noticed anything unusual. He doesn't stand out among the believers, he doesn't seem to be the most fervent believer, nor has he shown any particular hobbies. Yet, he's never abandoned his duties. At first glance, he's easily overlooked, but upon closer inspection, something seems amiss. Inessa's suspicion stems from a detail pieced together from fragments of information in several interrogation records. Dr. John, as a key and active member of their group, would sometimes act opportunistically, actively engaging in small activities before reporting to the messenger and then privately informing his companions. The farmer, however, once inadvertently revealed a detail during a casual conversation with a coffin shop clerk, before Dr. John even informed him. How could he know that the carrier of the plague that Dr. John had impulsively released was perhaps yogurt that the master had casually given to the slaves, with the cream skimmed off? This wasn't the slaves' daily diet, no normal person would guess that. And to guess so accurately. If this were taken out of context, many would see something amiss. However, this old detail lacked a clear and detailed timeline in the interrogation records. Dr. John's reports to them occurred around the same time, and the coffin shop clerk's accounts were inconsistent and contradictory. So Inessa memorized the contents of every interrogation record, logically deduced the order of Dr. John's reports, and then filtered out the questions. Tisk tisk. If there were a contest for the most beautiful girl with the best memory, you'd be competing against a martial arts encyclopedia Wayne Yuan. Focusing on a specific target for investigation and searching for a target within the scope of the investigation are obviously two different things, especially when there are enough people. However, considering that the suspect has now been apprehended, Wayne and Inessa didn't disturb the peace in the middle of the night by waking up the main force. Instead, they went back to the church and interrogated the second-in-command again that night. Considering that the second-in-command might be a mini-boss, Wayne specifically asked Inessa to remind the guards on night duty to be more vigilant, and he also brought a small pistol with exorcism bullets. After confirming that the other person was wearing specially made shackles, Wayne used a deception tactic this time. Divine Messenger, we have a basic understanding of your situation, and your crimes are essentially confirmed. We're questioning you again to give you a chance to confess, and also to gather more details. The other person had a straightforward demeanor. Bullshit. Wayne, what nonsense are you spouting? Wayne looked down, picking at his nails. Actually, I can understand your thinking. If you had only instigated and encouraged them to do those things, even if you were exposed, given the current situation in America and the townspeople's mindset, even if you were brought to court, you wouldn't necessarily be found guilty by the jury. Some people might even become your admirers and followers after hearing about your deeds. Then Wayne looked up and met the other person's gaze, but unfortunately, if I were to catch that divine messenger, I wouldn't give him that opportunity. That divine messenger attacked me before and tried to kill me. I will ask the judge or the church to convict him of assaulting a public official and attempted murder of a law-abiding citizen. Then, no one else will know about this evil cult, nor will they know that you've always claimed never to target free citizens. They'll only know that a resident of a small western town attempted to murder the town's current sheriff, and that the killer's accomplices had a long history of collecting and desecrating human corpses. Then, that divine messenger will likely be in the newspapers as a psychopathic killer. He might even become a bastard despised by all the citizens of America. To deal with bad guys, of course, you have to kill them and destroy their spirit. Otherwise, if good people are always being held at gunpoint, do they really think they can only be honest? After listening, the second brother seemed a little surprised by Wayne's approach, his expression clearly darkening. Wayne, do you know what you're doing? Whose side are you on? Actually, I've been a bit confused about that myself lately. Wayne shrugged first, then smiled, but I figured it out now. I'm not some kind of saint, just an ordinary person with my own thoughts. I don't care about your nonsense. So, is it really you? It's more dignified for you to confess than for us to find something on the farm tomorrow and then confess. The second brother's eyes darted around, his demeanor completely different from his previous redneck image, who probably never passed exams. Finally, his expression turned sinister. I'm innocent. And I won't confess. You won't find any evidence. Wayne crossed his arms. You're so confident? You look down on Pastor Tywin's men, huh? Tomorrow I'll have Inessa complain to the big shot. Chapter 52, Evidence Found. After roughly determining that the second son was likely the so-called messenger of God, Wayne and Inessa originally planned to rest briefly in the church lobby before leading the main group to conduct a thorough search of the second son's farm at dawn. After all, the man was already imprisoned in the church, so there was no rush. Then, in the lobby, the two encountered the middle-aged man who had previously relayed Pastor Tywin's orders and helped introduce others. After understanding the situation, he suggested that Inessa should report the investigation progress to Pastor Tywin immediately. Report now? Wayne glanced at the large clock on one side of the lobby. It was past 4 in the morning. Don't you city folks sleep at night? Even Inessa couldn't help but double-check. Pastor Tywin, you're still up? After receiving confirmation, Inessa called Wayne, and together with a middle-aged man, they headed towards the church's lounge. Upon reaching the lounge door, the middle-aged man knocked lightly twice, and a response quickly came from inside. Please come in. When Wayne and his companion entered, Reverend Tywin was sitting at his desk, seemingly writing a letter. After glancing briefly at the two who entered, Reverend Tywin lowered his head again and continued writing furiously. Ms. Inessa, what is it? Please speak. Inessa briefly reported to Reverend Tywin the situation is confirmed so far, as well as her general guesses. Very good. Reverend Tywin nodded slightly after listening, then dipped his pen in ink. The technological development of this world was not entirely the same as Wayne's impression of Earth. While fountain pens with ink cartridges had already been invented, many discerning individuals still preferred dip pens. His gaze then shifted to Wayne beside him, before turning to Inessa. Did this sheriff contribute to this? Inessa nodded. I understand. Reverend Tywin lowered his head again, his writing continuing as he spoke. Ms. Inessa, I am satisfied with the progress of your investigation. If there are no unforeseen circumstances, you do not need to report to me further. You are in full command. Then Reverend Tywin tapped the table twice, and the middle-aged man reappeared in the doorway. Reverend Tywin didn't look up. Rouse, keep an eye on this sheriff. Based on his specific contributions, you can have him fulfill a reasonable request. The middle-aged man exchanged a glance with Wayne, then nodded. Reverend Tywin seemed to have finished writing another sentence before looking up again. Is there anything else? No. Inessa said. Very good, go ahead and get busy. Reverend Tywin gestured to Inessa, then glanced at the middle-aged man. Wake the young men up, don't keep the lady waiting. To be fair, some people who become big shots do have something special. Although Wayne didn't particularly like Reverend Tywin's style, working for someone like him was actually quite comfortable. You didn't even need to say anything, everything was arranged perfectly. So a large group of people rode off on horseback towards the second son's farm and began a thorough search. Unfortunately, it was completely deserted. Asking his wife and children, they only knew that the second son liked to go hunting and fishing, but they didn't know his specific whereabouts. They initially thought it would be like searching for a needle in a haystack, but Reverend Tywin's men were indeed professionals. One of them released a bat from a cage. First cutting his wrist and feeding it blood, then finding some clothing or other items with his second son's scent in his house, letting the bat sniff them, and even giving it some hair from a comb. Then the bat, with a small lantern hanging from it, flew ahead, with a horse team following behind. They searched several incorrect places along the way. Finally, as dawn broke, the group found a hidden cave. Wayne initially thought the little bat was quite amusing and practical, even considering keeping one as a pet someday. However, after seeing it drink blood every few flights, Wayne realized it might not be so easy to raise. Moreover, it seemed to only drink the blood of its feeder, causing the feeder to bleed until their lips turned white. The feeder had consumed several vials of potions and now needed assistance to walk. The cave entrance was hidden in shadow, a shadow in a very special sense. At first, no one noticed anything amiss, even passing by it a couple of times. Only after realizing the bat was circling the area did they dismount and begin a serious search. Finally, several people, like priests, chanted prayers, sprinkled water, and one even lit candles, thoroughly searching the area before finally finding the right spot. Then, the professionals gathered around to observe for a while. Inessa raised her large gun and fired a shot, as if a bubble had been popped, revealing the cave entrance from the shadows. It was so complicated. No wonder the second brother was so confident Wayne wouldn't find any evidence. But precisely because this thing was so troublesome, Wayne felt they had found the right place. The group split up, each carrying a torch, and began exploring. Inessa and Wayne were the second group. Taking the makeshift torches, they went inside. Wayne discovered the cave was surprisingly spacious. And it seemed to have been used for quite some time. Some of the wooden carvings had begun to decay, and many of the human skeletons piled inside had lost their whiteness. Inessa raised her torch and looked around. Did he build an altar to an evil god here? The group searched the cave separately, and Wayne found what seemed to be the key to convicting the second brother, a pile of notes he had hidden there. Well, not exactly hidden, he seemed to have set up a workshop-like space on this side of the cave, with tables, chairs, shelves, a workbench, and even a makeshift bed. The notes were simply placed on the tables and shelves. Several of them were even diaries. You see, how many decent people write diaries? Wayne pulled out what appeared to be the oldest one and glanced at it by the torchlight. He turned to the first page. Coming to Blackrock Town was definitely the right decision. Today I've found a suitable cave. According to the book, as long as I replenish the magic circle with enough materials and pray to him, it will become a place protected by darkness. Finally, I can study the book undisturbed. Tisk tisk. This guy is basically wicked from the very beginning. Boring. Wayne flipped through about 10 pages at once. I'm a useless piece of trash. Why didn't he respond to my prayers even though I followed the steps in the book exactly? Was it because the corpse wasn't fresh enough? Or, this is interesting. Wayne was also curious about how he eventually succeeded, so he quickly flipped through the pages until he reached the last page of the diary. Damn it. Mr. Constantine seems to be starting to suspect me. My mentor is arriving in Blackrock Town in a couple of days, so I'll have to ask him if he has a solution. What? Mr. Constantine? Had he stumbled upon his own backyard? Wayne was about to look for the rest of the diary when he felt his spiritual intuition sounding an alarm. Although the danger premonition wasn't as strong as when Lena summoned the wise sage, it was still a cacophony of warnings. Wayne turned his head and saw several professionals backing out of a branching entrance in the cave, as if some ferocious beast was inside. Open your eyes to the minimalist lines. At this moment, the lines throughout the cave are like tempered glass that has been struck, rapidly spreading spiderweb-like cracks, as if trying to envelop the entire cave. Oh no, I thought it had already been updated, but it was a mistake. During the new book period, the update time will still be roughly 7 a.m. to 4 p.m., maybe a little later, but that's about it. Sorry. Chapter 53 Sacrificial Ground. In normal vision, A large swath of darkness appeared, like flowing ink, rapidly spreading along the cave's inner walls. Wayne and Inessa checked each other's figures and then rushed towards the cave entrance. Previously, there were still team members guarding the entrance. However, this area of the cave's inner walls was now covered by a black film, a vast expanse of darkness, obscuring the entrance entirely from view of the remaining guards. The space has been sealed off, beyond guard. Inessa first told the nearby team members, then raised her voice slightly as she moved closer to the fork in the cave. "What's going on inside?" "An evil spirit." One of the team members, who had retreated out, answered her. Then, swallowing hard, he added more details. "There's a natural pit inside, with a magic circle set up. It's feeding the remnants of a higher-level evil spirit." "How strong is it? Is its condition stable?" Inessa immediately pressed for more information, raising her large gun as she spoke. Wayne took the torch from her, and then Inessa began reloading. A team member answered her quickly from the side. "Initial assessment, its psionic strength is roughly equivalent to 4th tier fallen. But its rank seems to have fallen too much. It's been overfed and seems to be on the verge of going out of control." Inessa continued reloading while making a quick decision. "I'll go check its status. The rest of you, find the nodes that it's sealing off the space, quick." "Yes, sir." The professionals began to do their own thing. Wayne glanced around and saw lenses, compasses, candles, powdering, watering, chanting. They were doing all sorts of things. No wonder their uniforms weren't the robes of church monks. There weren't many people in this group who looked like church people. Inessa reloaded and then headed towards the forked entrance with her gun. Wayne followed Inessa, holding the torch, and they both crawled into the forked entrance. After walking a few steps into the forked entrance, there was a small cliff, and further ahead was a large pit. The height difference between the bottom of the pit and the top of the small cliff isn't too great, probably only about 2 meters. It would be difficult for an ordinary person to fall to their death here, but climbing back up wouldn't be easy either. The pit is about the size of a football field, and it's been transformed into something resembling a sacrificial altar. The outermost ring, near the pit wall, consists of many small circles, each about half a meter in diameter. Each circle is surrounded by a small pile of human bones, spaced about a meter apart, with varying numbers and placements of thick white candles burning inside. This creates a play of light and shadow within the pit, giving it an unsettling feel. Slightly closer to the center of the pit is a ring of stacked skull towers, each about the height of a thigh. These skull towers are roughly shaped like small pyramids, their bases connected, allowing a person to easily step between them. At the very center is a magic circle. Several concentric circles connected by a large inverted pentagram, filled with strange patterns and incomprehensible symbols. Small braziers were placed at the 5 vertices of the pentagram, while numerous thick white candles sat at the other nodes. At the very center of the magic circle was a small pit. A quick glance revealed a mixture of dark red and black liquid, seemingly containing meat and soup, along with many short, fat, white creatures wriggling within. Floating above this pit at the center of the magic circle was presumably the so-called evil spirit. Woohoo! A massive clump of black mist. The outline of this clump of black mist resembled many half-meter-long earthworms emerging from a human body. However, it was shapeless and flickered, almost like a beating heart. If the black mist emanating from Grey Wolf Freddy was like a kitten, then this clump of black mist felt to Wayne like a tiger that had been caged and starved for 3 days. It looked like it might suddenly howl and pounce at any moment. Wayne looked around. In his simple, linear vision, the spider web that enveloped the entire cave all converged at the end of a large mass of black mist. Seeing Inessa changing the lens on her binoculars, Wayne pointed to the black mist. "Inessa, the space sealing node you're looking for looks like this." "Are you sure?" Inessa asked, glancing at the newly lensed binoculars, then turning and pulling Wayne along. Her voice was short and urgent. "Run." Several team members had already started searching in that direction, and suddenly there were many more people near the crater. One of the team members seemed to have discovered something as well and was about to report to Inessa. Inessa had already shouted, "Everyone, get away. Defend." At that moment, the frequency of the flickering black mist suddenly increased dramatically, from thump, thump, thump to thump 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 thump. A wind inexplicably began to blow through the cave. The wind speed wasn't high, but it felt strangely sharp on the face. The surrounding darkness also pressed in, and the area illuminated by the torches drastically decreased. Bang! 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 Suddenly, a series of sounds of things hitting each other came from the cave. Before Wayne could react, he was suddenly slammed against the cave wall as if hit by a dump truck. Thump. First, a pain shot through his front, then his back, and the back of his head hit the wall, making him see stars. He spat out a mouthful of blood. He landed on a candle as he fell. Inessa also slammed into the cave wall next to her with a thump. Wayne's torch had somehow flown away, so he used the dim light of the candles in the pit to pull her up. Inessa felt quite shaken by the impact, but after getting up, she immediately clutched her arms, as if the injury there was more serious. Wayne helped Inessa to her feet, and then she pulled him along, continuing to run towards the main cave. "What do we do with this thing?" Wayne asked as they ran. A teammate beside him shouted, also pulling those around him away from the black mist, "What are we still doing? Get out of here. It's out of control, it's about to break free." As if in response to his words, the skull towers around the magic circle suddenly exploded one after another, bone fragments flying everywhere in the cave. Then, a tremendous force slammed everyone to the ground. Chapter 54 Spiderweb. If an evil spirit that is bound and fed in this way breaks free of its restraints when it goes out of control, then its spiritual energy will explode to a level that is much higher than its own in a short period of time. After recovering from their injuries, Wayne took advantage of the brief disappearance of the evil spirits to carry the wounded out of the branching cave with a large crater and magic circle. Those injured in the evil spirit's outburst were mainly those who had been near the crater. The others who remained in the main cave were also impacted, but their condition was generally good. The cave was still shrouded in darkness. After the evil spirits subsided, the group gathered torches together to form a small campfire. Those with the more serious injuries were carried to the fire to receive treatment from the other team members. Inessa sat with Wayne a little further away from the fire, explaining extraordinary knowledge to him while treating her own injuries. Inessa had also suffered considerable impact injuries, but her most serious injuries appeared to be on her upper arms and lower legs. Her upper arms and lower legs were covered with mysterious patterns that faintly shimmered with the golden light. At this moment, the mysterious patterns, like a tight band, were constricting tightly, leaving purplish glue bruises on her upper arms and calves. Her two rather pretty little hands also seemed to be swollen due to lack of blood. Seeing Wayne staring at the bruises on her arms, Inessa applied medicine while indicating to Wayne not to worry too much. "It's alright. These runes are used by the Church of the Holy Spirit to bind my extraordinary abilities. However, because my extraordinary abilities are related to blood, now whenever I'm injured, it thinks I'm trying to use my extraordinary abilities, and then it will activate. These bruises aren't very serious, they'll heal quickly after it subsides for a while. It's the spiritual suppression caused by its contraction that's more uncomfortable." Wayne nodded slowly. Inessa finished applying the ointment, rolled up her sleeves again, and continued to explain extraordinary knowledge to Wayne. "So when hunters discover that a bound evil spirit is about to erupt out of control, they usually choose to get away immediately. If we can't get away, then we need to defend ourselves immediately. As long as we can withstand the initial burst of psionic energy, the danger posed by the evil spirit at this stage isn't particularly great." Wayne thought for a moment, then looked at the cave still shrouded in darkness. "So it's like a bomb, once it explodes, we'll be safe?" Inessa shook her head. "No. The danger of the evil spirit isn't manifested on a physical level. Like now, after it breaks free of its restraints and the psionic energy bursts out, that's when it's most dangerous." According to Inessa's explanation, most of the extraordinary beings in this world believe that the dimensions of this world can be divided into 2.5 layers. One layer is the so-called real world, or the material world, which is the world people live in. The other layer is the unknown inner world, which different religions and organizations have different understandings and names for, but it is generally believed to be the source of extraordinary power in the real world. The final remaining half layer is considered to exist in the gap between the real world and the inner world, belonging neither to nor connected to either. This half layer is called the spirit realm. Like a thin membrane, it is sandwiched between two worlds and simultaneously constrained by the other two. Inessa concluded, "So since we are still trapped in this space by darkness, it means that although the evil spirit disappeared after breaking free, it didn't actually leave. It merely temporarily hid in the spirit realm corresponding to this space. Evil spirits can only exist in the real world under specific circumstances, otherwise, they usually gradually dissipate. So, based on the survival instincts of evil spirits, it's likely that it trapped us here to find an opportunity and target to possess us." Upon hearing this, Wayne immediately thought of the black mist that had emerged from Freddy's corpse, the one so delicious it could stuff a person. He immediately asked, if this evil spirit possesses an extraordinary, could it end up being eaten instead? Inessa thought for a moment and nodded. If the possessed extraordinary has a suitable domain, a high enough rank, and a body capable of withstanding it, then that's a possibility. Wayne blinked, waiting for Inessa to say, but an exorcist priest identified it earlier and said this evil spirit was fed on the residual will of a higher level evil spirit. The residual will of a higher level evil spirit can cause irreparable contamination, ultimately leading to loss of control. It's generally not recommended to devour such an evil spirit unless absolutely necessary. Ugh! It's big and fat, and inedible. It's like a golden apple's nail, only good for destroying the environment. At the urging of Inessa and the exorcist priests, after providing initial bandaging and treatment to the wounded, everyone quickly returned to alert status. As one of the exorcist priests pointed out, the most terrifying thing about facing evil spirits isn't that they might suddenly appear from nowhere to attack. It's that everyone thinks they were safe, but then tragedy strikes at some point, and everyone suddenly realizes that someone has already been secretly possessed by an evil spirit. That's the most frightening thing. So, what was initially a spirited and determined group immediately became hesitant and timid after the exorcist priest's words. Disrupting morale on the front lines, even if you mean well, you need to learn to phrase things correctly. Otherwise, you might become a sacrificial lamb. The exorcist priests distributed holy water and insignia-like items, and lit as many fires as possible, so no one dared to leave their immediate surroundings. And so, a stalemate ensued. Fearing the evil spirit would continue to seal off the space, preventing them from leaving, yet also worried that it might suddenly and inexplicably break the seal, leaving them unable to identify the problem, Inessa arranged for those with the ability to observe the evil spirit or possess extraordinary items to be placed in positions with better visibility. Wayne, having just found the node, was placed on the outer perimeter. Opening his vision through the minimalist lines, Wayne looked at the darkness surrounding them in the cave. Then he noticed that a section of the spider web of lines enveloping the entire cave had suddenly begun to move. It was as if something unseen was passing by that spot. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 55 Capture. Seeing the spider web of lines subtly change, Wayne decided to pretend he hadn't noticed. So he continued to feign interest, holding the lens he'd borrowed from Inessa and looking around aimlessly. The lens was actually just an ordinary one Inessa had swapped out of her monocular telescope, but Wayne was pretending it was an extraordinary artifact. Although Wayne didn't mind that Inessa vaguely knew about his vision ability, Inessa was the exorcist girl who had been educating him about various extraordinary things, so she naturally received different treatment. In front of outsiders, he wanted to keep it a secret as much as possible. If he saw anything later, he could just say it was all thanks to this lens. The lines that made up the spider web, like a thin rubber sheet being pushed against from behind, were now being pushed into a round shape and were suddenly protruding downwards. The deformed part of the lines gradually approached the head of an exorcist priest. Sensing something might attack at any moment, Wayne quickly pointed towards the exorcist's head, shouting a warning, "Watch your head. Something's coming." The exorcist, holding a burning candle, first looked up at his head, then glanced left and right, finally meeting Wayne's gaze with a hint of confusion. He seemed puzzled by Wayne's warning. Meanwhile, the round thing made of distorted lines continued its approach towards the exorcist's head. Wayne was getting a little scared. "Don't look at me. Watch your head." Fortunately, the exorcist, being a member of a special team, possessed basic professional skills. Although slightly doubtful, he clearly chose to trust his companion's judgment. He slightly raised the candle with one hand, while simultaneously opening a thickly covered book with the other, tucking it under his arm. Suddenly, the round thing made of distorted lines shattered. A wisp of black mist, almost imperceptible, silently appeared from the void at that spot. The exorcist priest reacted swiftly. Almost the instant the black mist appeared, he tore a page from the open book tucked under his arm. He then simultaneously held the page and the candle towards the direction from which the black mist had appeared. The page was lit by the candle, and the exorcist priest seemed to be chanting some incantation in short, rapid murmurs. The page, as if coated with an accelerant, burst into flames almost instantly upon contact with a candle flame, emitting a blinding light that shouldn't be present when paper is burning. The light pierced the surrounding darkness like a sharp sword. A hideous face composed of black mist, exuding spiritual pressure, appeared before everyone's eyes with a shrill howl. It seemed that it was about to pounce on the exorcist priest, but now, in the sudden burst of light, it encountered immense resistance and was forced backward. Although its specific features were indistinguishable, the ferocity of its expression was clearly palpable. The head formed of black mist was covered with numerous thin, long tentacles extending outwards, like disgusting parasites bursting from its head. Then, the exorcist priest, holding the fiercely burning page, thrust it directly at the hideous black face like a bayonet. A faint, mournful wail seemed to echo, then the black face recoiled, and the evil spirit vanished into thin air once more. Wayne saw the distorted lines of the spider web, like a resilient rubber sheet, quickly sprang back to their original shape. The exorcist priest then hurriedly flung the remaining page, which was almost burning in his hand, to the ground. The remaining page had already burned to ashes before hitting the ground. Then, the exorcist priest grinned at Wayne, giving him a thumbs up and waving it back and forth several times. Wayne also waved the glasses he was holding at him, as if showing off a good thing. Twice in a row, Wayne detected the evil spirit's target ahead of time. A rough improvisation plan took shape under Inessa's brief commands, gestures, and hints. One team member, who had been injured but not seriously, silently followed instructions, walked to the outermost edge of the campfire, spread out a blanket, and sat down with his back to the darkness. Several team members with abilities to deal with the evil spirit casually moved slightly closer and then stood guard nearby. Wayne wasn't sure if this fishing with a straight hook approach would be effective, but since it was the experienced Inessa who suggested it, there must be a reason. So Wayne stood a little distance away from the team members, opposite to them, exchanging glances. The other team members silently observed their movements. After waiting for a while, the spider web of lines finally changed again. The round shape, formed by deformed lines, was indeed moving towards the team member acting as bait. Wayne pretended to look around at the scenery while extending the 5 fingers of his right hand. Seeing Wayne's signal, the other team members tacitly began preparing their weapons. Then, the round shape suddenly shattered again. Wayne's right hand swung sharply in the air, his 5 fingers clenching into a fist, attack. Theoretically, those most skilled at dealing with evil spirits should be clergy who believe in the Holy Spirit. In the Old World, that would be priests of the Holy See. In the New World, it would be pastors of the Holy Spirit Church. Therefore, the main force in the team specializing in dealing with evil spirits should all be exorcism priests of the Holy Spirit Church. But just like the uniforms these team members wore weren't monk robes, their style seemed quite different from the priests Wayne had imagined. The blanket beneath the bait team member was ignited, and flames instantly spread along the patterns on the blanket, quickly forming a magic circle on it. Then an exorcist priest, carrying a dirty-looking rag, which he had taken from a very valuable-looking box, neatly folded in which Inessa had said was someone's shroud, was draped over the area where the evil spirit had appeared. Simultaneously, the same exorcist priest lit several pages torn from books and held them high behind the evil spirit, seemingly cutting off its escape route. The first layer of rag was punctured by the black energy, and soon a second and third layer were added. Then a group of exorcists sprinkled holy water, chanted incantations, applied things, dripped holy oil, and chained the bulging, deforming ball of rag. Greek letter sigma, degree, audibly beating a child. Finally, they stuffed the rag into a specially made box and sealed it. The darkness in the cave seemed less heavy. Chapter 56 Delivering the Rewards. As the dark aura that had sealed the cave gradually dissipated, the professionals on site busied themselves again. Some team members made a horseback journey, and several empty carriages drove from the town to the site, only to return fully loaded. Some of the items from the cave were burned or destroyed on site by the professionals, while others were taken back to the town's church. As for the cave itself, it was sealed and sealed off by the cleanup team. Specifically, they drew a magic circle deep within the cave and then laid high explosives along the entire route, from the inside out. Then, boom, Wayne and Inessa were already riding back to town when they felt the earth suddenly tremble. Many birds were startled and took flight from the nearby groves. Looking back, they saw that even the hillside above the cave had caved in. What a pity. Wayne had been thinking of tricking Tony into exploring the cave someday after the church had decontaminated it. Or you could tell little Taylor it's a good place for a date. The pile of so-called unclean items brought back from the cave were inspected, packed, and sealed in the church. At least on the surface, the town returned to peace. Because Wayne participated in the search, the church didn't prevent Wayne from looking through and examining other things in the cave, except for some notes involving heretical beliefs or extraordinary knowledge. For example, the second brother's diary. The diary didn't record in detail how the second brother or his so-called mentor dealt with Mr. Constantine back then. But judging from the diary's date and the subsequent contents, the culprits who made Wayne an orphan should be the two of them, or at least include them. The diary entry reads, "Thank you, mentor. Fortunately, after I asked my mentor for help, he dealt with the Constantines in time. But unfortunately, he didn't deal with the child as well. We can only wait and see if the child has heard his father mention anything he shouldn't know." Tisk. They don't even spare a little kid who's bad at math? Are they even human? Based on current precedents in Kansas, convicting the second son or his mentor is practically a certainty. However, sending the second son to the gallows is no longer an option. Judging from the timeline, the second son likely convulsed in the church, bleeding profusely from his eyes, ears, nose, and mouth, and died around the time the evil spirit broke free of the magic circle. According to Inessa's deduction, the magic circle was likely linked to the second son's life, used to bind the evil spirit and extract extraordinary power from it. Technically speaking, this would theoretically be safer than being directly possessed by the evil spirit. However, if problems arise later, it's like a dwarf feeding and abusing a lion, and one wrong move and he's on his deathbed. Anyway, by the time Wayne returned to the church, the second son was already rotting. Anyone who didn't know better would think he'd been dead for at least 10 days or 2 weeks. If it weren't for the fact that the guard responsible for guarding him was a professional and took timely measures, Wayne guessed that the second son's corpse would probably be crawling with worms by now. Fortunately, the second son's death wasn't the main issue. Wayne had already found the name of that mentor elsewhere in the diary, Henry McCurdy. The person directly handling the search results with Inessa was the middle-aged man named Lucy, who had been following Pastor Tywin's side all along. With evidence, a written confession from many years ago, and the perpetrator apprehended beforehand, this was considered an ironclad case by both church and secular standards. Therefore, Pastor Tywin didn't follow up on the specifics of the subsequent matters, but after roughly listening to the briefing, he ordered people to start packing up. He himself, accompanied by his bodyguards, was about to leave. It seemed he had something truly important to attend to. However, Reverend Tywin was reliable. Before leaving, he not only helped Inessa write the letter to the Exorcist Guild, but also specifically instructed the middle-aged man named Rouse to include Wayne's assistance to the team in the cave as part of Wayne's contribution. After watching Reverend Tywin depart in his spacious carriage, the middle-aged man named Rouse took over command and directed his subordinates to handle the aftermath. "My name is Ruse Bolton, head of the Exorcist department in Kansas City," the middle-aged man introduced himself after giving instructions to his men. He looked at Wayne, who was still reading his diary. Then he asked, "Mr. Wayne, regarding your reward, would you like to claim it now, or later? I should continue working in Kansas City for the foreseeable future. If you wish to claim it later, you can contact me in Kansas City." Wayne had already decided on his request, so he picked up a bookmarked diary and unfolded it. He pointed to the name Henry McCurdy written inside. "Can I ask the church to help investigate this person? He's likely an extraordinary, a fallen one, not only connected to the belief in evil gods, but also confirmed to have committed murder. I want to know his whereabouts." Although Wayne himself had no feelings for the Constantines, judging from Wayne Constantine's memories, they were decent people, law-abiding, loving, and kind. At least they deserved to live, more so than some criminals. Now that he was the sheriff of Blackrock, there was no reason for him to spend all his time arresting other wanted criminals while letting those connected to the original owner of his body go free. Anyway, until I decided to quit, I'd handle any case in Blackrock, new or old, as long as I wanted to. However, to Wayne's surprise, after glancing briefly at the diary, Ruse Bolton laughed. "Henry McCurdy. He was born in New York City. He was famous when he was wanted over a decade ago, known as Billy the Kid. Then he faked his death in New Mexico, changed his name to Henry Antrim, and committed numerous crimes afterward. Later, he formed a criminal organization calling itself the Overseers, and has been active in the West ever since. If you're looking for him now, his current name, Mr. Wayne, as sheriff, should be known, William Bonney. William Bonney. Holy crap. A top-tier wanted criminal with a $5,000 bounty. The kind that can create a precipitous gap between the second highest bounty. Seeing Wayne's reaction, Roose Bolton gently patted Wayne's shoulder. I also want to know his whereabouts. If you can find him, life or death, the church will honor the bounty, or fulfill any request. So, Mr. Wayne, please change your request. Chapter 57 Harvest. Wayne now has a deeper understanding of the so-called bounties. Grey Wolf Freddy, $250, was a werewolf who seemed incomplete, always aiming for the head, and only died from an accidental headshot. Arthur Iverson, $500, was a skinless, hairless, mutated gorilla covered in tumors and pustules, capable of easily demolishing shacks. Wayne and his team spent half a day toying with him in a wagon before finally killing him. It seems that wanted criminals with high bounties who haven't been killed or arrested for a long time are basically extraordinary individuals. As for this William Bonney, his bounty is top tier among wanted criminals, a whopping $5,000. Even Roose Bolton, the head of Kank City's exorcism department, seems to have been eyeing him for some time, but still hasn't caught him. Wayne didn't dare to think about what William Bonney would become, or how long he would have to suffer before dying. And William Bonney even had his own criminal organization. So Wayne tried to convince himself that it was an old case from so many years ago, and the Constantines were good people, law-abiding, loving, and kind. They shouldn't blame him. So let's look to the future and enjoy each day. I can't exactly go and capture the Tang monk and his disciples, can I? At most, I can help them repaint and maintain their water heater as a way of mourning. Therefore, Wayne hesitated for a moment. His initial request now seemed a bit unrealistic. He'd rather go back to Roose Bolton later if he needed anything. As for exchanging it for money, that was out of the question. A reasonable request approved by a bishop candidate and directly fulfilled by the head of a major city's exorcism department carries considerable weight in the United States, a country that values letters of recommendation and personal connections. Sometimes it can be a crucial entry ticket, or a life-saving talisman. For example, if Wayne were a wealthy businessman, simply holding such a talisman, without even using it, could deter many malicious individuals. Such an effect is not something an ordinary person can easily achieve by spending a fortune at a critical moment. Therefore, Wayne simply smiled at Roose Bolton. I haven't decided on my request yet. I'll contact you when I need it. Okay. Roose Bolton smiled and nodded to Wayne. In that case, I look forward to our next meeting. With that, he turned and left to continue supervising the others' clean up. Wayne and Inessa had just returned home when Lena, who was waiting on the living room sofa, told them some good news. I already took the town hall staff to see it this morning, and they confirmed the body is indeed Arthur Iverson. After you collect the bounty, Mr. Wayne, they'll provide their signatures to verify and reimburse you. Wow, another $500 in hand. No, it's split among 4 people. So that means I get an extra $125. Maybe a little less. Because according to the previous agreement, the cost of using the extraordinary item has to be deducted first, and the remainder is split equally. Wayne now knows that this is actually a common rule when extraordinary individuals temporarily form hunting teams. Deducting the cost of using important items first is to prevent anyone from having to assess their losses and consider whether it's worthwhile in a critical moment. After all, in many people's minds, the life of a temporary teammate might not be more valuable than their own item. If that happens, it would be extremely detrimental to a hunting operation that could be dangerous at any time. A moment's hesitation could lead to the entire team's annihilation. So it's better to be clear from the beginning and not let teammates who used important items suffer losses. When something unexpected happens, even if you earn less money, it's still better than losing your life. So, on their trip back to town from Tecumseh's tribe, the group's total earnings reached $2,280. After deducting the cost of items like exorcism bullets, each person probably got around $500, which is equivalent to each person finding 2 gray wolves like Freddy on the roadside. This was a good deal. In addition, Wayne and Lena had an extra gain, a lump of turtle jelly. This dark, jelly-like substance was extracted from the corpse of the transformed monster, Arthur Iverson. Inessa can't absorb psionic energy yet, and none of us have a craftsman to preserve it for a long time or to make it into an extraordinary item. So, this spiritual material will be split between the two of us. Lena, seemingly out of nowhere, produced a balance scale, grabbed a knife and fork, and began cutting the clump of turtle jelly that appeared to be shrouded in a faint black mist. First, she roughly divided it into 2 pieces, placing them on small plates. Then, she cut a little from one side of the scale and added a little from the other. In the end, they each received a slightly larger piece and many smaller pieces. Wayne, carrying one of the small plates, was about to return to his room to absorb it. Lena, however, called to Peter. The large spider, who had been excitedly hopping around nearby, immediately climbed onto the plate and began to devour it. Lena sat at the table, her hands supporting her chin, humming a little tune, watching Peter slurp away at the clump of turtle jelly, like she was feeding a dog. Huh? Why does it suddenly feel like I'm about to eat dog food? So Wayne asked curiously, I've noticed that after you got the extraordinary material, Lena, you've been feeding it to Peter. Don't you absorb it yourself? Lena stuck out her little tongue at Wayne, making a slight gesture. This is a lady's little secret, I won't tell you. Back in his room, Wayne sat down at his desk and reached for the lump of guiling jelly. He followed the same steps, opening his invisible eye and attempting to absorb it. He slurped it down. Delicious. Damn, it felt more like he was eating dog food. Wayne clicked his tongue slightly, dismissing the thought, and continued absorbing. The dark guiling jelly, once it got close enough, began to glow in his other vision. Upon contact, the glowing substances within the lump of guiling jelly began to converge towards Wayne. Wayne felt his spiritual energy rapidly replenished, and then, even after it was fully replenished, the incoming spiritual energy continued to push outwards. This was because Wayne consciously controlled the absorption speed. He then discovered that the organs within his body capable of containing spiritual power, as the spiritual power slowly expanded outwards, were gradually becoming stronger, much like muscles that had been exercised. Wayne felt that his blue bar seemed to have become longer than before. Chapter 58. After absorbing its spiritual energy, the lump of turtle jelly turned into a mushy, translucent jelly block. It appeared that the previous lump was actually formed by countless intertwined tentacles of varying sizes and lengths. Then, after the spiritual energy was drained, it fell apart. The faint black mist that had surrounded it also disappeared. Although Wayne was a little disgusted by its appearance after being eaten, he wasn't too bothered. After all, he had even eaten moths before. Eating these was a piece of cake. Moreover, this extraordinary ingredient actually brought Wayne a small surprise. His mouth felt slightly numb after eating it. Woohoo, he had finally combined numbness and spiciness. However, although the taste was alright, there was one small problem that still bothered Wayne. Let's take the initial wisp of black energy emanating from Grey Wolf Fred as a benchmark. If Grey Wolf Fred is considered 1 dog, then the previous half of the fluttering moth was 5 dogs, and this lump of turtle jelly is roughly 10 dogs. Logically, the effect of eating the turtle jelly should be twice that of the half of the fluttering moth. However, after Wayne ate it this time, he neither felt he gained any new skills, nor did his mana bar increase significantly, only about 1/10. Wayne subtly expressed his doubts to the old driver, Inessa. Inessa pondered for a moment, seemingly understanding the problem, yet even more puzzled. She looked Wayne up and down with a hint of surprise. This involves 2 things. First, what you just said, Wayne, about seemingly gaining new extraordinary abilities and being able to sense the amount of spiritual power remaining in one's body, usually occurs when an extraordinary person officially enters Tier 2. In the initial stages, Tier 0 refers to the stage of simply being infected by evil spirits or coming into contact with spiritual power. People with weak constitutions will become weak, sick, or even go mad at this time. But they can only passively endure the effects caused by spiritual power. Tier 1 is the stage of being able to initially control spiritual energy. Some people will think they have received a blessing from the gods, or that they have mastered non-human power. But at this time, the ability or physical mutation is still uncontrollable, and cannot even be used or triggered subjectively and stably. From Tier 2 onwards, the ability or physical mutation begins to enter the stage of being controllable. It is only when this stage is reached that one can truly be considered an extraordinary person. One begins to be able to understand one's own state and how to use one's own abilities through spiritual intuition. Some extraordinary individuals involved in physical mutations will also know at this point how to actively enter an extraordinary state. So, after absorbing the spiritual power contained in that moth's corpse, you should have just fully entered Tier 2, truly becoming an extraordinary individual. Wayne thought for a moment and understood. After swallowing the fluttering moth, he should have successfully established his foundation. That is, he had just filled a full bar of experience points, thus leaving the beginner zone and officially leveling up to the entry-level stage. Therefore, it's easy to understand why he didn't gain any new skills after eating the turtle jelly, and the increase in his mana bar wasn't significant after leveling up. The difficulty of subsequent leveling up often increases, and the spiritual power he had absorbed was clearly insufficient for another level. So it could only increase his mana bar slightly, just a token gesture. After Inessa finished explaining, she looked at Wayne, clearly somewhat amazed. If you weren't even at Tier 2 before, how could you survive almost unscathed after close combat with a werewolf? It seems your abilities are truly suited for combat. Wayne shrugged. Maybe it's just good luck? Inessa didn't comment. She seemed to ponder for a moment, then looked into Wayne's eyes. Actually, I want to ask you formally. Would you be interested in joining the Hunter Association and becoming a hunter? To be honest, if Wayne had to choose one of the organizations Inessa and Lena had mentioned so far, the Hunter Association was indeed one he currently favored. Wayne mentally went through the organizations he knew in order. First to be eliminated were the Holy See and the Holy Spirit Church, both of which shared the belief in the Holy Spirit. The reason was simple: Wayne disliked feudal superstition. Every week, I have to get up early to attend worship services, and they're always bringing up the Bible. Even when we eat, they have to thank the Holy Spirit for providing us with food. Please, that food costs money, okay? I haven't seen the Holy Spirit directly give me living expenses. If we're really talking about faith, Wayne might as well bring out the Internacional and let them experience the awe-inspiring power of the hammer and sickle. And putting aside ideological issues, Wayne is clearly not in the holy realm. If he joins them, what if he ends up like Inessa, with tattoos all over his arm, and then has to do odd jobs to accumulate contributions? Would that be asking for trouble? So Wayne won't choose either of those. Next, the so-called truth cult is excluded. The reason is even simpler: Wayne has a personal grudge against their deity, the wise sage. If he can't afford to offend them, he can at least avoid them. As for the so-called life school, Wayne doesn't even consider it. I've never heard of any good organization that requires you to recruit others before you leave. It's obviously a trap, maybe even a bottomless pit. No need to consider it. The Hunter Association, on the other hand, sounds pretty cool. He remembered the test instructions saying, the Hunter Association is a mutual aid organization born from the consensus of combating out of control and evil extraordinary beings. That suits Wayne's taste quite well. However, Wayne still had some concerns. Based on the test results, he seemed to be in the nature domain, naturally opposed to the order domain of the Hunter Association. What if one day he accidentally got killed by a hunter with a single vial of reagent? So Wayne suddenly mentioned this to Inessa, saying he hadn't been able to determine his domain in the test. Inessa became even more puzzled. You safely absorbed the dark domain psionic energy from that moth's body. And what Lena shared with you just now was extraordinary material from the abyss domain, extracted from Arthur Iverson's corpse. You absorbed it without any problems. Isn't the only domain opposite darkness and abyss the life domain? How could it be hostile to the Hunter Association? And you didn't even determine your own domain before absorbing the spiritual energy from extraordinary materials? Wayne was stunned. He'd been locked in the cave by darkness for most of the day and hadn't slept well for several days, so he'd almost forgotten about it. When he saw that dark lump of turtle jelly, he instinctively assumed it was also from the dark domain, so he absorbed it directly after taking it back to his room. If he really was an extraordinary being from the nature domain, Wayne estimated he'd already ruined himself with that one move. Then Wayne felt a bit of lingering fear, but even more so, he was filled with doubt. His spiritual intuition had been telling him all along, that lump of stuff was edible. Chapter 59 Hunter Association. To confirm his domain, Wayne asked Inessa for the test kit again, took out the test tube representing the life domain, and tried a small sip of the potion inside. Well, it was sweet. Even cloyingly sweet. According to Wayne's taste, if he had to choose between the two, he actually preferred the sour taste representing nature to the cloying sweetness. Therefore, Wayne still felt that, based on the overall test results, he should lean more towards the nature domain. However, whether he liked or disliked the taste of a certain reagent was only a subjective evaluation, while the fixed relationships between different domains were objective facts. If judged according to the antagonistic relationships between the domains, then only life could safely absorb both darkness and abyss simultaneously. Therefore, Wayne could only convince himself not to be too idealistic and to honestly accept the reality that he was a life domain sweets person. Thus, his biggest worry was dispelled. The life domain was indeed not hostile to the Hunter Association, which sided with order. So, after confirming that he could freely apply for retirement from the Hunter Association, Wayne happily chose to join. Yay! I'm going to become a despicable outsider too. Unfortunately, the Hunter Association's headquarters and main area of operation are in the Old World. In the New World, although the Hunter Association isn't officially recognized as an illegal organization, the Church of the Holy Spirit still cracks down on wild extraordinary individuals within the Hunter Association. Therefore, their membership in the American Federation is far smaller than in the Old World. They can only be considered a vibrant civilian organization, with only hidden branches in a few major cities. In other words, Wayne can't officially register with the Hunter Association yet. So, what should I do after becoming a hunter? Wayne asked. Seeing Wayne's willingness to join the Hunter Association, Inessa's expression softened slightly. She thought for a moment and said, although the Hunter Association has existed for over 1,000 years, its organization is relatively loose. Besides the association regularly issuing missions or recruiting hunters for hunting operations, the rest mainly involves information and item exchange among hunters, as well as mutual assistance. As for what they do, that largely depends on their own desires. Some want revenge, some want to fight against evil extraordinary beings, and some simply want to hunt to earn bounties or improve their rank. But having a hunter's identity makes acquiring certain intelligence and items much easier. In fact, some intelligence, historical data, weapons, and extraordinary materials are only available within the Hunters Guild, which hunters can exchange for by accumulating contribution points through completing missions. And they're allowed to sell them. I understand, Wayne asked, so should I register with a Hunters Guild branch first? The nearest Hunters Guild branch to Blackrock Town is in Kank City. If you go now, you should be registered as a prospective hunter. Inessa paused, or, we can find an opportunity to conduct a few hunts. According to the procedure, if a new hunter completes 3 successful hunts under the witness of an experienced hunter, I can then act as your witness and register you directly as a full-fledged hunter. Given the chance, he'd definitely choose to skip the probationary period. Wayne asked almost without hesitation, so, do you have a target you want to hunt now? Where should we hunt? Inessa shook her head slightly. The church's forces have just been active in Blackrock Town on a large scale these past few days. Even if there are extraordinary individuals committing evil in this area, they will likely remain silent for a while. We can observe for now, and I can also tell you some basic knowledge about hunters. Wayne thought about it and agreed. All right then. He'd been busy for a while, so he decided to rest for a few days first. The next morning, Wayne brought 2 pretty temporary policewomen to the police station. The policewoman was just a cover for Inessa in town, so she was maintaining her persona. But Lena was simply bored and had nothing better to do, so she came along to experience life and update her wanted posters. At this moment, Lena looked at the walls of wanted posters in the police station, her eyes shining. It seemed she had already figured out how to spend the bounties. These wanted posters were all backed up, and bounty hunters could take the corresponding wanted posters directly from the police station if they were interested. However, Wayne discovered that the bounties on the wanted posters that Lena actually collected were mostly around a few $100 US. As for the wanted posters with bounties of thousands of dollars, Lena didn't take a single one. So Wayne pointed to the William Bonney wanted poster posted high up and teased her, "There's a wanted poster over there with a bounty of $5,000, Lena, why don't you take it?" Lena rolled her eyes at Wayne. That guy has a bunch of high-level extraordinary users under his command. Unless it's a crucial stage where I need to hunt extraordinary users who meet specific conditions, who would bother with them? The cost-benefit ratio is too low. Huh? You know him? Wayne asked. I don't know him, but I've heard of him. Lena folded up the wanted posters she had selected and stuffed them into her small bag. His criminal organization is the one that calls itself the Overseer, Some people say they're Robin Hood-like figures who only rob law enforcement officers and the wealthy who commit crimes. Their reputation is mixed, but they're not bad among wanted criminals. However, I heard from a bounty hunter who had survived a near-death experience that when they do bad things, they usually try to eliminate all witnesses, so they're less likely to be reported, which is why their bad deeds aren't so obvious. This guy's bounty has already reached the top level of $5,000, and he's considered not obviously bad? If he confessed to all his crimes, wouldn't the price go up even further? What of Voldemort? Wayne ignored Lena's collecting of wanted posters and turned to walk into the cell. In today's western towns, the town court is still very efficient, because in the West, without witnesses or direct evidence, once a criminal escapes, no one can find out who did the bad things. So those who can go to court are basically criminals who have been proven guilty, or those who were caught red-handed. Even if these people deny some of their crimes, they may not escape the gallows. At this moment, only the one who reported the criminals who were going to attack the town remained in the cell. Seeing Wayne appear, he immediately stood up and ran to the bars of the cage, and then began to speak urgently. "Sheriff, please let me explain. I don't know why they haven't come to attack the town until today. But what I told you before was the truth. They did plan to rob the bank." "Huh? You didn't know they were gone?" Wayne nodded at him. "The information you provided has been confirmed. We've dealt with those criminals. I'll explain the situation to the judge later. As for your specific sentence, that will depend on the jury and judge's opinion." "They have already been dealt with?" The criminal's face showed obvious surprise. In the past few days in his cell, apart from hearing a faint, loud explosion in the distance, he hadn't heard a single gunshot in the vicinity of the town. Rumors circulated that so many criminals would come to participate in the robbery, yet they couldn't even break into the residential area of this town. "Yes," Wayne nodded, "so you stay put. Someone should come to pick you up for trial in the next couple of days." "Yes," the criminal answered loudly, looking much more obedient than before. "Damn it, if I had known this town was this dangerous, I shouldn't have come. For the sake of the Holy Spirit, if I ever have the chance to meet that guy who gave me the message again, I swear I'll kick his ass with my boots." Chapter 60 Mounted Police. Having received the bounty and completed the necessary paperwork, Wayne replenished his ammunition, and the entire Blackrock Police Department mounted their horses, preparing to patrol the town. Passing the church, they encountered what appeared to be the last two groups of church members returning home. One group was the last small contingent of the team led by Pastor Zhou Yuan. Upon seeing Inessa, several of her former teammates from the cave surrounded her. They exchanged polite greetings with Inessa and Wayne as they dismounted, then revealed their true intentions. "Miss Inessa, do you have any interest in selling the lens used in that evil spirit cave?" "The lens?" Inessa asked. "Yes, the lens." One of the exorcist priests nodded repeatedly, pointing slightly at Wayne. "It's the lens you lent to this sheriff. If you're interested in selling it, we'd be happy to buy it, or you can exchange it for church contribution points." Inessa paused slightly, then blinked, seemingly considering how to answer him. At this moment, Wayne curiously leaned closer. "How much are you planning to pay for it?" The lens was just an ordinary telescope lens. Once removed, it could at most be used as a magnifying glass. He had been able to see the evil spirit entirely thanks to Wayne's vision. Wayne was very interested in this, wanting to know roughly how much his ability was worth in the eyes of the church's professionals. The exorcist priest hesitated for a moment. "A special item that can detect the formless forms of high-ranking evil spirits, as long as it doesn't have particularly negative effects. I'm personally willing to offer $1,000, or pay the corresponding contribution points. However, if it has other functions and the price is higher, then I might need to use both cash and contribution points to ensure payment $1,000. Wayne and Lena were tempted by the price, but Inessa spoke up. She seemed to have finally found an excuse, shaking her head at the exorcist priest. "You might have misunderstood. That lens is a one-time use item. It has now reverted to an ordinary item and no longer possesses any special abilities. Buying it back wouldn't be of any use to you." "Ah, is that so?" Hearing Inessa's words, the team members who had gathered around seemed somewhat disappointed. The exorcist priest was still not giving up. "If it's a one-time use item, may I ask where I can buy the same item?" Inessa seemed to find continuing to fabricate stories too troublesome, so she slightly tugged at Wayne's coat sleeve, letting him stand in front to deal with the situation. Wayne's eyes darted around slightly, We found that on the corpse of a fallen one. We don't know the exact origin of that lens. That fallen one was called Grey Wolf Freddy, a wanted criminal who fled from elsewhere. Perhaps because Wayne had been investigating the cultists, the exorcist priest wasn't surprised that Wayne knew about fallen ones. After listening, he simply sighed helplessly. Is that lens valuable? Wayne asked. Of course. The exorcist priest nodded. That previous evil spirit was fed on the residual will of a higher-level evil spirit, so its original status was quite high. Once it entered its hidden state, it couldn't be observed using ordinary methods used against ordinary evil spirits. As you saw before, when dealing with evil spirits, being able to observe them and predict their actions in advance greatly improves safety. Therefore, the corresponding tools become extremely valuable. Wow. Hearing you say that, I feel like I'm getting more and more capable. After seeing off the last group of team members from Kank City, the remaining members were the exorcism team from the county church. Captain Joffrey was still looking down on everyone, while the other team members politely said goodbye to Inessa and Wayne. Before leaving, Captain Joffrey even snorted, as if in response to Wayne and the others. Who is that guy just now? Why was he so arrogant? After the group had ridden a little further away, Lena asked, watching their retreating figures. Wayne shrugged. Not familiar, probably a rich kid. How rich? Lena pressed. Wayne gave this little money grubber an annoyed look, but unexpectedly, an answer popped up beside him. Captain Joffrey's grandfather is the current bishop of the Archdiocese of Kanks. It's said they own nearly half a block of property in Kanks. Reverend Hark, who was also in the farewell procession, finished seeing everyone off and, hearing Lena's question, casually answered, I also heard that the bishop had already chosen his preferred successor, and Captain Joffrey seemed to have a chance to be promoted to the cathedral and head of the exorcism department. But it seems things changed after Reverend Tywin arrived. Seeing Wayne's surprised look, Reverend Hark smiled smugly. This is an experience I've recently come up with. To understand the real situation, you have to learn to bypass the administrators and directly ask the people in charge. See, I haven't been idle these past few days. I've almost figured out the inside story. Wayne had nothing to say, only giving a thumbs up. The group lingered in the church for a while, and just as they were about to leave, Tony, who happened to be delivering red wine, quietly pulled Wayne aside. Tony pointed to Lena, who was looking at the murals. Lena rarely came to a place like a church, and everything seemed new and exciting to her, and said, I just saw her by chance, and I think she's so beautiful. Long legs, a curvaceous figure, and a slightly dangerous air about her. Can I approach her? What do you want? Wayne asked warily. Lena wasn't an ordinary person. He'd heard her casually mention her past, prison escapes, various cults, and even the ability to summon seemingly powerful wise sages. If Tony wanted to pursue Lena, Wayne figured he had no chance. Unexpectedly, Tony's eyes lit up. I want to have one like her too. Huh? Wayne's thoughts faltered for a moment before he finally came to his senses. The she you're talking about, is she a giant spider? Yes, Tony nodded. Don't you think she's very beautiful? Tony, you're not an ordinary person either. Wayne thought about the name Peter. Tony, she might actually be a male spider. So? Tony didn't seem to care. So I think you have no chance. That spider seems to be a rare find, a collector's item. Tony seemed a little disappointed. Oh, that's a pity. Wayne patted Tony's shoulder, about to offer some casual words of comfort, when suddenly someone rushed in from the church entrance, first looking around the church hall, then heading towards Wayne. This person was a town hall employee. Wayne, something's happened. The county mounted police are here requesting assistance. Chapter 61 Unincorporated Areas. The process of westward expansion in the United States involved first roughly outlining the boundaries of each state and county on a map. Free settlers then gradually formed autonomous towns and cities. Finally, once a state had a sufficient population, it was formally established through referendums and legislation, officially joining the Union. Within a state, the boundaries of each county were initially determined directly on the map, while the boundaries of each town or city expanded gradually from scratch. During the westward expansion, many counties in the West faced a problem. Unincorporated areas were too large and almost impossible to manage. Specifically, many areas might exist within the boundaries of a county on the map, and each might be quite large. However, the surrounding towns or cities were not yet large enough to be incorporated into their boundaries. Therefore, The town's sheriff and the city's police would not overstep their jurisdiction to manage the area's security. While the county government was theoretically responsible for maintaining order, in reality, its limited manpower simply couldn't handle it. Thus, in a sense, these unincorporated areas, not yet truly under administrative control, became veritable lawless zones. This was the very problem the county mounted police encountered when they requested assistance from Blackrock Town. Several innocent free citizens had been murdered in the unincorporated area. Normally, such an incident outside the town's boundaries would be easily dismissed by the town's sheriff with a dismissive "none of my business" or "none of your business." Unfortunately, the victims were all registered residents of Blackrock Town. They had gone to the unincorporated area to search for gold. So the county sheriff sent his mounted police captain to his office to play the rogue. "A resident of your town has died. Although the incident didn't happen within your town's boundaries, we're short-handed and need your assistance. So, are you going to help or not?" Of course, he wouldn't actually say it that bluntly, but the meaning was pretty much the same. "Hello, I'm Harvey Dent, the county mounted police captain. This is my deputy, Hannibal Lecter. I'm glad you're willing to offer your assistance." In the mayor's office, Wayne was introduced to the two county mounted police officers who had come to request assistance. The captain even introduced himself to Wayne. Good grief, with those two names suddenly put together, Wayne couldn't even tell for a moment whether they were there to ask for help or to send him to his death. The mayor then let the two mounted police officers rest briefly in his office before pulling Wayne aside for a private conversation. "Wayne, from a long-term perspective, it's necessary for our town to provide assistance in this matter. I hope you won't object to my early agreement to help." The deceased were, after all, official residents of our town. Although the incident didn't occur within our town's boundaries, from the perspective of the townspeople, they will certainly want us to retaliate and avenge them. This is both the responsibility of elected officials and a good opportunity to garner votes for both of us. If you find any danger during your investigation, you can leave or retreat beforehand, depending on the specific circumstances. But I think we should demonstrate our responsibility to the townspeople from the outset. Wayne nodded silently, indicating his understanding. As for the bad guys, if Wayne felt he could handle them, he wouldn't mind making the trip and sending them on their way. Seeing that Wayne agreed with his assessment, the mayor privately told Wayne about the two mounted police officers. One of them, Captain Harvey Dent, was handsome and popular with voters, a strong contender for the next county sheriff, and might even have the chance to run for county executive in the future. The mayor also suggested that Wayne try to cultivate a good relationship with him, as it might come in handy sometime. As for the mayor's own career plans, he had absolutely no interest in the county executive position. In the current political landscape of the United States, a mayor who builds a small town from scratch and develops it into a city wields far more influence and voter support in the local area than a county executive who merely manages other public areas within the county. If the ultimate goal is to run for governor or become a member of Congress, then being a county executive in a remote western county is not a more effective stepping stone. It would be better to continue cultivating the local community after upgrading the small town into a city, which would garner significantly more votes and prestige. Moreover, the mayor, like Mr. Constantine back then, was a part-time landlord with political ambitions. Therefore, after buying the land and participating in the town's development, they didn't pursue a path of developing plantations. Instead, they selected key plots of land near the town. The better the town developed, the more their purchased land would appreciate in value. With proper planning, it could potentially become a core area or district in the future. Deeply tied to the town's development, this was risky, difficult, and yielded slow returns. However, if development went smoothly, the potential long-term benefits could be incredibly substantial. After a private chat, the mayor took Wayne back to his office, where they began discussing specific matters. The mounted police captain, Harvey Dent, first briefed Wayne on the current situation. Based on clues from the survivors, this incident appears to be the work of a gang. Their leader is nicknamed Pikehead Butcher, and the gang is estimated to have around 10 members. The problem we're facing now is that this gang operates in various towns throughout the county, and their hideout is located in an unincorporated area. We suspect the murdered townspeople may have accidentally discovered their hideout while searching for gold, leading to their pursuit and deaths. So our objective is to use the currently confirmed leads to arrest or kill the gang and destroy their hideout. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 62 Wild Wolves. 2 carriages, each leading a horse, slowly drove out of the town. The one leading the horse was the patrol carriage that Harvey Dent and his team had driven to the town earlier. Captain Harvey and his men were county mounted police, responsible for patrolling all county roads and a portion of unincorporated areas with relatively good transportation. These unincorporated areas, simply put, were the desolate wilderness and remote mountains. If the terrain were even slightly flatter and closer to major roads, no one would be left uninhabited or undeveloped. For example, the area Wayne and his team were heading to was even further from Blackrock Town than the indigenous tribe of Bitcombe. A one-way trip, without rushing, would take about a day and a half, almost 2 days. Even so, Blackrock Town was the closest town in the county to that area, which was why the mounted police had the audacity to request assistance. If they continued searching further in that area, it would take even longer, probably at least a week round trip. The distance wasn't particularly far, but the roads were difficult to navigate. Moreover, because it wasn't on the way to populated areas, it seemed quite remote, and they hadn't seen many living people along the way. In those days, transportation in the county wasn't very convenient, so the county mounted police usually patrolled in several groups. Each group would patrol a route, stopping and starting, taking about half a month for a single round. Then they would go home to rest for a few days, then serve a few more days in the county, and then continue patrolling, in a cycle. That's why they carried horse-drawn carriages when they went out. They would ride horses when needed, and otherwise use the carriages to carry simple supplies, patrolling the routes methodically. The other carriage was the 4-wheel drive vehicle Wayne and his group were driving. It was a battle-damaged version, and hadn't been repaired since they drove it back to town last time, so they were just using it for now. However, the horses had been replaced with Wayne's own. There were 4 people in the carriage: Wayne, Inessa, Lena, and Parker. Let's count them as 5, since Parker counts as one person, then Peter must be counted too. So the 2 carriages drove side by side, enough for a mahjong table, while the county mounted police only played 2 tiles. They claimed to be requesting assistance, but in the end, those providing assistance became the main force. The gang that was targeted this time, while numerous, didn't have a particularly notable record. At least, the crimes and the people didn't match up. So Wayne and Lena had searched the police station, and unless someone among them used an alias, none of them, including their leader nicknamed Pikehead Butcher, were wanted criminals with bounties. If the mounted police hadn't found survivors, they wouldn't even have known there was a gang hideout there. These little karami were quite well hidden. After an uneventful day's journey, as the sun began to set, the group found a sheltered spot near water to spend the night. Captain Harvey, a seemingly upright and sunny young man, was currently recounting his experiences and anecdotes from his year as a county mounted police officer. His deputy, a refined middle-aged man named Hannibal Lecter, was preparing dinner around the campfire, the main ingredient being a wild rabbit hunted along the way. Parker should have been the chef. But when Lena saw how quickly and skillfully the man skinned the rabbit, she decided to let him lie in the carriage, feigning motion sickness to save electricity. Captain Harvey then introduced Dr. Lecter to everyone. This Dr. Lecter is from the East Coast. He's currently in the mounted police for a short-term experience, and he's one of the few dedicated team doctors in our unit. I happened to be on the same patrol as him this time, and I never expected to encounter something like this. But thankfully he was there. The survivor was able to survive after emergency treatment, and we were able to get clues about that gang. Captain Harvey's introduction was better left unsaid. Upon learning that this Mr. Hannibal was actually a doctor, Wayne felt his PTSD flare up. He couldn't help but peek several times at the pot to confirm if it really contained rabbit meat. After eating their fill of hard bread with a stewed rabbit, night fell, and everyone prepared to rest, as they needed to get up early to continue their journey the next day. Wayne and Parker weren't allowed to sleep in the 4-wheel drive, so Wayne spread out a blanket and lay down by the campfire, while Parker went even further, climbing a tree. Peter, who was entitled to sleep in the carriage with the 2 girls, was officially expelled from Wayne's ranks. After the 2 mounted policemen also went to rest, only Wayne remained by the campfire, looking rather pitiful. Around midnight, in his sleep, Wayne vaguely sensed several lines moving nearby, and he suddenly woke up. There was murderous intent. Another field of vision had quietly opened up. A quick glance revealed several large, snarling wolves creeping towards the campfire. Wayne instinctively reached for his revolver, then released it. He then stealthily drew his spare dagger. No need to disturb the peace in the middle of the night. He'd try melee combat first. As Wayne lay in wait, he noticed simultaneous movement from both carriages. Inessa and Lena had quietly sat up in their carriages, and a pixel leaped swiftly from one of the four-wheeled vehicles, darting towards one of the wolves. It seemed to be Peter. But in the other carriage, Wayne thought he saw Captain Harvey. His neck suddenly lolled to the side, as if he'd fallen into deeper sleep. Then, there was no movement in his other field of vision, while in Wayne's naked eye, Dr. Lecter had silently emerged from the back of the carriage. His figure, in his other field of vision, was indistinguishable. Then he silently approached the wolves. Wayne lay in place, trying to move the camera to track him. Fortunately, although he couldn't be seen directly in the minimalist visual field, his position and movements could still be determined by the changes in other lines after focusing slightly. So he was on one side, and the pixel representing Peter was on the other, like two Pac-Man characters, with the outline representing the wolves in the middle, and they quickly fell one by one. Finally, he and Peter seemed to touch each other, and when Dr. Lecter returned, the outline showing his figure gradually emerged. He walked directly to the campfire. Wayne pretended to have just woken up, sat up and glanced at him. Dr. Lecter and Wayne looked at each other silently, then he put his index finger to his lips, as if to signal Wayne to keep it a secret, and shushed Wayne. Chapter 63 Enemy and Friends. The next morning, after everyone had gotten up, Wayne looked at Captain Harvey, who seemed to have slept well the night before, and couldn't help but feel a little smug. Look everyone, there's a muggle here. Let's isolate him. Judging from last night's events, Dr. Lecter should also be an experienced extraordinary. Although his specific area of expertise was unknown, there wasn't any hostility between them yet. And this Captain Harvey, having been taken down before he could even use his abilities, probably didn't know anything about that. After a quick breakfast, everyone agreed on a route, and the four-wheel drive sped up slightly, leading the way. Inessa had come along, partly to observe Wayne's performance during the operation, to identify any bad habits or weaknesses that might endanger him during the hunt, so she could offer targeted advice and suggestions. On the other hand, she also wanted to take the opportunity to educate Wayne on some extraordinary knowledge. So, inside the carriage, Inessa's little lesson was in progress. If you have the opportunity, the first step in hunting is best to begin by observing the opponent's habits and making a preliminary determination of their domain. Usually, after reaching Tier 2 and officially entering the extraordinary world, extraordinary individuals will gain a preliminary understanding of their own abilities through spiritual intuition. Some extraordinary individuals have a relatively clear understanding of their abilities, understanding the specific details and limitations of their abilities, and can learn how to fully utilize them through thought and practice. Some extraordinary individuals only have some superficial concepts, like birds that know how to fly but completely lack understanding of physics. From Tier 2 onwards, extraordinary individuals will truly acquire the corresponding extraordinary abilities within their domain. The number varies, but generally, having 2 or 3 initial abilities is relatively better. Abilities within the same domain usually share some common characteristics. However, when it comes to specific abilities, some features are easier to identify, such as obvious abyssal transformation or holy rejection, while others are not so easy to discern. Because each extraordinary makes different choices when advancing in rank, the specific combination of abilities and the specific rank of qualitative change for each extraordinary are also different. Specific judgments still require accumulating experience through hunting. It can't be explained in a few words. But just like the differences between birds, fish, or felines and canines, identifying the general domain is relatively easy. For example, holy will reject or assimilate other domains, darkness will indiscriminately erode and corrode, and the extraordinary forms in the abyss domain are mostly deformed and distorted. Professor Inessa paused slightly here. Any questions about this part? Me. Lena, who insisted on auditing the class despite not having to attend, was the first to raise her hand. The School of Life Sciences has a special topic that studies the characteristics of hidden domains. I want to ask, how do you hunters judge those kinds of individuals? Inessa replied without hesitation, for extraordinary individuals who have hidden domain characteristics, we judge based on their behavior. Those who are relatively stable and follow the rules can usually be treated with friendliness. And we don't need to investigate too much, otherwise, we usually judge by examining the corpse or the characteristics of the extraordinary materials extracted. Goodness, so you hunters just kill those considered unstable or disobedient first, right? Wayne then thought for a moment and raised a specific case question, like Dr. Lecter last night, how should we judge his domain? Inessa thought for a moment. Last night I observed Dr. Lecter's abilities, and they seemed to have the effect of concealment or hiddenness. That's why Lena said that Peter almost fought with him. In this case, we can use the process of elimination. Mutually hostile domains may exhibit nearly opposite characteristics. Conceptually speaking, traits like hidden or concealed are the opposite of holy and abyss, which require a strong presence, so they generally occur in their opposing domains. Therefore, we can initially determine that he is most likely in the domains of death, darkness, and knowledge or wisdom. A smaller probability is that he might be in the special domains of order or life. Inessa paused slightly before continuing to explain to Wayne, the hostile ally relationship between domains can also be initially determined from this. Since he might be in darkness, death, knowledge, wisdom, or order, or life, then holy and nature, which are definitely hostile to these domains, can be targeted directly. As for the other domains, further observation is needed to avoid wasted effort. Of course, the hostile relationship between domains is not necessarily the same as the hostile ally relationship between individuals or organizations. It must be judged based on the actual situation. In special circumstances, those with hostile domains but good personal relationships can become allies. Conversely, those with the same domains may be mortal enemies. Wayne took a moment to process this, then nodded. Indeed. After walking for another half day, the group officially entered a more rugged hilly area. The original path had become a mountain trail. From here on, we're pretty close to that gang's hideout. During a short rest at midday, Captain Harvey pulled out a map, marked with signs. Continuing along the mountains in that direction, we might encounter gang members on the way. There might also be sentries or guards along the way. Just to be safe, shouldn't we hide the carriage first and then switch horses to continue? Wayne thought what he said made sense, and he was about to nod in agreement when he heard a dissenting opinion. No. The objection came from Lena and Dr. Lecter. Lena's opinion seemed to radiate the experience of an outlaw. Since it's a gang's hideout, it's a safe zone for them to distribute loot or life temporarily. The gang has quite a few members, and this place is relatively remote. So they'll probably need to use horse-drawn carriages to transport loot or daily necessities like alcohol. Therefore, the journey to their hideout can probably be done entirely by horse-drawn carriage. We should bring as much equipment as possible and continue getting closer. We shouldn't switch to horse-drawn carriages so early. After their previous encounter, Lena seemed to have developed a fear of insufficient firepower. Dr. Lecter's advice also seemed equally experienced. If we drive there in a horse-drawn carriage and unexpectedly encounter gang members, we can pretend there are their accomplices in the carriage, using this as an excuse to get closer before making our move. But if we switch to horses, the people and weapons will be too conspicuous, and they'll be easily identified. Thinking about it carefully, it seems that the bad guy's thinking is actually more effective when it comes to outsmarting them. I've learned something. Chapter 64 Preparing for the Night Raid. 3 horses stealthily crossed a ridge, peering around with binoculars to confirm there was no danger ahead. Wayne then ran back towards the ridge, signaling to the 2 wagons behind him with a small mirror. Even a Western cowboy with poor math skills knows that in the wild, to avoid drawing attention, it's better to stand on the front of the mountain than on the ridgeline. Although the group chose to continue driving the wagons, as they were likely getting closer to the bandits' hideout, necessary reconnaissance was essential for safety. So the wagons continued along the increasingly rudimentary and bumpy mountain road, neither conspicuous nor concealed. Then Wayne, Inessa, and Captain Harvey switched to horses and scouted from the side of the road. If they encountered a small group of enemies, the wagons would attempt a deceptive tactic. If they encountered a large force, they would make their escape immediately. Wayne casually probed Captain Harvey's values every now and then. Sunny, upright, and his interpersonal skills and career plans seemed reliable. Aside from being a muggle, he seemed like a competent, good police officer. At least he wasn't sleazy, nor did he possess that untainted purity that some Westerners had. Overall, he was alright. As long as Captain Harvey didn't start flipping coins, Wayne felt he could still maintain a superficial friendship with him. After repeating this for a while, Thanks to the general location and precise direction provided by the previous survivors, Wayne and his group discovered a place that appeared to be a gang hideout as the sun was about to set behind the distant mountain ridge. In a valley, they found a place that resembled a small village. A wooden outer wall, connected by sharpened tree stumps about a person's height, seemed to be the work of indigenous people. Inside were many wooden houses of various sizes, which appeared to have been pieced together by immigrants using semi-finished components. It was described as a suspected bandit hideout because, given the nature of Western bandits, they might be willing to kill, rob, and drink heavily, but asking them to cut down trees and build a stronghold deep in the mountains just didn't quite fit their image. If they were willing to do manual labor, they'd be better off developing their own small farms. Why bother with bandits? So Wayne ran off to signal the wagon, while Inessa and Captain Harvey continued to observe carefully through their binoculars. Finally, the wagon veered off the road and found temporary cover in a small grove of trees, where everyone regrouped. They gathered around a simple topographical map and began a quiet meeting. Based on the clues provided by the survivors and our observations, the probability of that small stronghold in the valley ahead being a bandit hideout is quite high. We observed about 10 people there so far, but there might actually be more. They're all men, all look like immigrants, no slaves or natives. And there are no farm tools, no place to dry game. It doesn't look like a newly established farm or a hunter's lodge. There's no sign of work. Many of them are carrying weapons, which fits the characteristics of a bandit hideout. Inessa said, and Captain Harvey, representing the County Mounted Police, and Wayne, representing Blackrock Town reinforcements, both nodded in agreement. Look at their hideout. The outer wooden wall is about 2 meters high, with only one entrance. Near the entrance, that's probably the stables. A little further in, it seems to be the living quarters for ordinary members. Opposite the stables, this row looks like a warehouse. Then this is probably the kitchen, and the rooms further back seem to be the living quarters for the leaders or chiefs. As for the largest one in the middle, no one's been going in or out yet, so it's hard to tell. It might be a hay storage room or something, but I'm not sure. That's about it. After Inessa finished her observation summary, Wayne looked at Harvey Dent and asked him to summarize the opinions on behalf of the County Mounted Police. Captain Harvey, what do you think we should do? Captain Harvey pondered for a moment. I feel we can't jump to conclusions right now and confirm that it's the gang's hideout. A hasty attack could easily injure innocent people, but if it really is the gang's hideout, then it would be very dangerous for us to approach easily. Lena and Parker, who were standing next to him, immediately raised their hands. Then Lena's voice came. We can wait until dark and then grab someone to question. Captain Harvey was a little doubtful. I saw them all moving around in the village just now. Is it that easy to catch them? Oh dear, this kind of thing is hard to explain to a muggle like you. So Wayne also raised his hand. I also vote for Lena's plan. Then Inessa raised her hand, and Dr. Lecter, seemingly very tactful, followed suit, raising his hand as well. Captain Harvey looked at his teammates with slight surprise, wondering when they had suddenly developed such a tacit understanding. In the end, he could only nod. In that case, let's do it that way. As night fell, after a simple cold meal, Wayne and his men began preparing their equipment by the light of the kerosene lamp, which was covered by a lampshade. Having learned their lesson, Wayne was now applying gun oil to his lever-action rifle. 2 bullet belts slung diagonally across his shoulders, forming a large X on his belt was a holy water bottle on the left, a revolver on the right, and a bundle of high explosives hanging from the back. I want to see who can bully me this time because I didn't bring a long gun. There was no moon tonight. It was a pitch black, stormy night perfect for murder. As expected, Lena had Parker bring back a man reeking of alcohol late at night. Apparently, he was drunk and had been bitten by Peter while urinating nearby. Wayne raised the kerosene lamp slightly, exposing his face to the light shining from below. He found rope, tied the man up like a dumpling, and then stuffed a wad of cloth into his mouth. Then, together with Lena, they pointed the gun at his forehead. Before Captain Harvey and Dr. Lecter arrived, Peter the Spider slithered over and quietly bit him. The man suddenly jolted awake. He then saw 2 dark gun barrels and a reflective 6-pointed star badge. Beside him stood Wayne's grim face, his voice equally sinister. You know what we're here to do with you, right? The man hesitated for a moment, then nodded. Wayne cocked the pistol, keeping the muzzle pointed at him, and asked, if you're willing to cooperate, then nod again. But if you dare to shout, or refuse to cooperate, you'll die. Understand? The man nodded repeatedly. At this moment, Captain Harvey and Inessa arrived, surrounding the prisoner in a circle. Very good. Now tell us what you usually do, how many people are inside, and what's inside. Chapter 65. The advantage lies with me. Because the other party was very cooperative, the interrogation progressed quickly. The small village ahead was indeed a bandit hideout. Excluding this prisoner, there were 17 people inside tonight, armed with standard lever-action rifles and pistols. The members of this bandit gang seemed to be divided into two categories. One mainly patrolled the area around the hideout periodically, eliminating anyone who discovered it. The other mainly operated in the surrounding counties, not particularly active within their own county, only occasionally robbing or kidnapping passers-by or merchants they encountered while traveling between towns. The captured prisoner belonged to the second category. Both categories had a leader responsible for daily management. The leader managing the prisoner was the one nicknamed Pig-Headed Butcher. He was said to be nearly 2 meters tall, burly and overweight. Riding an ordinary horse, he looked somewhat like an adult riding a puppy. They needed at least 2 horses when going out, one to ride and one to lead, switching when one got tired. Inessa's assessment of the functions of the houses inside was generally accurate, but even this prisoner didn't know the details of the large, warehouse-like building in the middle of the village. He said it was managed by several other members of their gang, and it wasn't open to them when they returned. However, he vaguely knew it was probably related to religious rituals or similar activities. Wayne became slightly wary, and upon further questioning, he learned there was indeed a place near the village specifically for disposing of corpses. It was probably a burial ground. The prisoner didn't know how some of the bodies came to be there, but others were victims they kidnapped for entertainment, disposed of afterward. Anyway, after some questioning, it seemed there were at least several dozen people buried there. Oh wow, they sounded like a bunch of bastards. The Western security wasn't good enough, so you came here to cause trouble, huh? After asking about details like the distribution of personnel, and confirming that everything was roughly correct, Wayne knocked the prisoner unconscious with the butt of his gun, picked up the rag from the ground, and stuffed it back into his mouth. A moment of silence fell over the group. Wayne looked at everyone. What should we do next? How about we share our thoughts and then vote? Captain Harvey thought for a moment and spoke first. The enemy has more people than we anticipated, 3 times our number. Taking down this hideout directly seems unrealistic. To be on the safe side, perhaps we should take this prisoner back for interrogation first, then call for more support to bring them all to justice. Then, the gazes of Wayne's group turned to Dr. Lecter. Dr. Lecter's face remained expressionless. I think Captain Harvey's opinion is very sound. Their behavior is crude and vulgar. Although they might discover a member is missing and flee, returning first and then calling for backup is clearly the safest course of action for us. Wayne thought for a moment and agreed. Inessa, Lena, and Parker also didn't object. Finally, they reached a consensus. Considering the firelight would be too conspicuous in the forest at night, they decided to stay put and rest for the night, leaving with the prisoners first thing tomorrow morning. As the night deepened, Captain Harvey swayed in the county mounted police's carriage, and then Dr. Lecter emerged from the carriage. Wayne and his team had already prepared their equipment and were waiting outside. The extraordinary squad had officially assembled. As for Captain Harvey, we'll have a secret party, excluding muggles. Dr. Lecter's attire was similar to Dr. John's in Blackrock Town, a 3-piece suit, more formal, with a bow tie on the inner shirt and a bowler hat, giving him a refined air that clashed somewhat with the casual, rugged style of the American West. He had also donned a shawl-covered trench coat over it, which, in the darkness, exuded an air of nonchalant elegance and coolness, as if he didn't care about laundry. Dr. Lecter frowned slightly. Launching an attack like this is rather reckless. The old hunter, Inessa, was clearly an ambush enthusiast, nodding silently. However, she mainly wanted to observe Wayne's hunting style first, so as long as Wayne's plan wasn't too risky, she wouldn't offer much advice this time. She would review it later. Wayne and Lena, on the other hand, were more inclined towards ambushes. Unless the target was clearly a ticking time bomb, they'd rather take the plunge and run if necessary. Since we're already here, and we're not happy with what we've seen, but we feel we can still win, we might as well give it a try. A simple terrain map was once again unfolded under the kerosene lamp, which was covered by a lampshade. Wayne, referring to the map, began to roughly explain the plan he had previously discussed with Inessa and Lena. This is where their ordinary members live. Our plan is for one person to prepare backup and provide cover on the outside, while 2 others will scale the wall from this direction and approach from the rear of their quarters. First, try to knock over their horses, then attempt a surprise attack. It would be best if we could remain undetected, but if we are, we'll engage in small-scale combat and then retreat as quickly as possible. The objective is initial reconnaissance and minimizing enemy casualties. Wayne didn't have any bad intentions. If you were discovered, his first emergency plan was to throw high explosives into the enemy's dormitory. A backup plan was to throw them into the stables. Losing members would be best, but if that wasn't possible, he'd at least reduce their movement speed. They were all bastards anyway, there was no need to talk about chivalry with them. As long as he cleared out the mobs in the dungeon, it would be a perfect stealth. Dr. Lecter glanced at the map and pointed to the other side. I'll go in from here and head towards the entrance. I'll try to clear out the guards along the way and at the entrance. If there's a battle on your side, I'll try to create some noise to distract them. However, I can't guarantee the effect. Wayne was glad Dr. Lecter was willing to cooperate and handed him a magical gadget that might be used later. Then you can use this, it should be quite effective. By the way, Dr. Lecter, let me confirm, you have matches on you, right? Those were 2 high explosives that had already been dismantled, simple and unadorned, but they made a loud bang when detonated. Dr. Lecter nodded and then put the high explosives away. Lena didn't want Parker to be injured, so Parker stayed behind to guard the 4-wheel drive carrying the prisoners and Captain Harvey, and was responsible for driving it away if anything happened. The remaining group split up. Wayne and his 2 companions led the horses towards this side of the village, while Dr. Lecter led the horses towards the other side. Inessa, who couldn't afford to get hurt easily, found a high vantage point outside and kept an eye on the horses from there. Then Peter led the way, climbing over the wooden wall first. After confirming that the surrounding area was temporarily safe, Wayne and Lena stealthily approached the wall, preparing to scale it. HMPH, an extraordinary ambushing a bad muggle, the advantage is mine. Chapter 66 The Noob Slaughter Game. A rope loop was placed on the tips of the wooden stake wall, then someone tugged it down, tightening it. Half a head then peeked out from between 2 adjacent tips on the top of the stake wall, glancing left and right. The figure then gripped the top of the wall, quietly vaulted over, and landed. After Wayne and Lena entered the small village, following the direction on the map, they first crept towards the stables. In the west, horses were almost indispensable companions for daily travel, and also a form of hard currency. If given the opportunity, it was certainly best to bring one back. So Peter the Spider was the first to sneak into the stables, then came out again. No one was inside. Wayne and Lena then followed. Horses are actually quite alert and intelligent animals. Sensing the approach of strangers, a small, subtle commotion arose in the stables. Wayne and Lena remained in the stable for a short while, keeping watch to make sure no one approached. Then, Wayne tried to calm the nearby horses while simultaneously slipping some drug into their mangers. One horse, which had been grazing by the manger, quickly slumped down against it, its head resting on the manger. However, at this hour, not all the horses were still eating. Some were standing, some were lying down, some were leaning against the wall, and some were already resting. Wayne felt that the drug Lena had given him wouldn't be enough to knock out all the horses at once, so he asked her, "Can you get Peter to knock all these horses out?" Lena glared at him. "Don't put Peter in a difficult position. His drug pouch has a limited capacity, and it takes time for him to recover after using it. If he could knock out so many horses at once, why wouldn't I just let him bite the people inside?" That made sense. So they released a row of horses that were having a midnight snack, barely achieving their initial objective. The 2 then slipped out of the stables, hiding in the shadows of the wooden posts and heading towards the back of a row of wooden houses that looked like dormitories. As they left, Wayne noticed a padlock outside the stables and fastened it. As for Dr. Lecter, according to the plan, his route should be on the other side of the small village, proceeding from behind the warehouse on the opposite side towards the entrance. Upon arriving, they found the dormitories to be a row of 4 wooden houses, one of which was quite lively. Wayne and Lena approached from the wall opposite the door, where there were open blinds. Peeking in for a while, they saw 8 thugs inside, smoking, drinking, and playing cards. The room was quite smoky. It seemed they were playing something like Texas Hold'em, with one person acting as the dealer and dealing cards, 5 others holding the cards, and the remaining 2 watching. A row of lever-action rifles leaned against the wall. They didn't have enough men. Glancing again at the lit room 2 doors down, there were 2 grown men embracing, mouths agape, speechless. The remaining 2 rooms were empty. Lena retreated to the wall outside the window. Wayne, after a moment's thought, pulled out 2 high explosives, first pointing to himself, then to the bustling room. Lena gave an okay sign, holding her shotgun, her thumb pointing back towards the room with only 2 people. They split up. Peter quietly climbed in along the windowsill, while Wayne darted back to the windowsill of the busiest room. He placed his rifle on the ground, secretly struck a match, and simultaneously lit the fuses of both high explosives. Hiss 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 hiss. Holding them separately, and waiting for the fuses to burn in nearly to the end, Wayne suddenly stood up and threw the high explosives into the room, one on the left, one on the right. He quickly picked up his gun, crouched low, and scurried a few steps away from the cabin. Bang, bang. The cabin, located near the edge of the row of cabins, was hit by an explosion. The lights inside limbed, the outermost wall was blasted open, the wall tilted, and then half of the ceiling collapsed to the side. Almost simultaneously with the explosion, Lena fired a shotgun blast into the cabin. Wayne straightened up and, using the minimalist lines of the cabin, fired several shots in quick succession at the human figures struggling to stand or crawling towards the guns. Then, only faint groans and moans could be heard from inside. Lena, after firing her first shot, came over to indicate that she was done. At that moment, another explosion rang out in the distance. It was unclear how many more people had been affected by Dr. Lecter's attack. HMPH, a sneak attack, a slapstick, slacking off game, that's how simple, unpretentious, and boring it all is. Anyway, now that we have a captured thug and Captain Harvey as witnesses, and they don't have a bounty, let's just leave it at that. For people who are bad enough, reasoning with them is pointless. As long as they don't beg for mercy, just send them on their way. He crawled through the large hole blasted in the wall into the house, fired 2 more shots, smothered the burning kerosene on the ground, and that was it. 17-8-2, there should be 7 people left in the small village. Considering there are usually at least 1 or 2 guards at the entrance, that's probably 5 or 6 left. Wayne slung his gun over his shoulder, hesitating whether to check the big house first or go to the more secluded cabins further away to look for any remaining survivors. Then he noticed that the noise from Dr. Lecter's direction hadn't stopped. In fact, it seemed even more lively. He and Lena hurried towards the warehouse, and then Wayne met the so-called pig-headed butcher. He was a truly massive, muscular man. Imagine him, nearly 2 meters tall, with arms about the thickness of an average woman's thigh, covered in fat. That's about it. His head was covered in a pig's face, looking like a mask made from a severed pig's head, or perhaps it grew out of his body. Several wooden sticks and other objects were already haphazardly stuck into his body. He held a sharp, curved hook, the kind used in slaughterhouses to dissect dead pigs, and was chasing Dr. Lecter. Dr. Lecter seemed quite agile, circling the warehouse, occasionally picking up suitably shaped planks or sticks, still trying to fight back. What era is this? Who still uses cold weapons? Wayne raised his lever-action rifle and fired a shot into the side of the pig's head. Bang! The bullet hit the pig's head, went in, but the sound was off. No blood flowed out. The pig-headed butcher seemed to stiffen slightly for a moment, then turned to face Wayne. Wayne fired several shots, which slightly slowed his movements, but it felt like hitting a lump of dead flesh. It was as if he felt no pain whatsoever. Then, he let out a fierce howl, raised his large hook, and charged towards Wayne with speed faster than a galloping horse. Chapter 67 Demolition. As it turns out, some things are like being tricked into stomping your feet repeatedly. You'll get numb too. Maybe even more numb. Wayne had been watching from the sidelines, seeing the usually refined Dr. Lecter being chased by the pig-headed butcher, his once neat clothes and hair now disheveled, and he thought he looked quite pathetic. But when Wayne himself was caught up in the chase, he realized that Lecter's appearance was actually quite elegant and dashing. When the pig-headed butcher charged towards Wayne, chaos erupted. The bullets, though penetrating the pig-headed butcher's body, seemed to cause him no pain or significant damage, only slightly stiffening his movements. So Wayne ran a few steps, turned, fired a shot, ran a few steps, turned, fired another shot, and just as he reached the dormitory, the pig-headed butcher was already close behind, knocking him to the ground. Then Wayne felt a sweet taste in his throat. He had just turned around on the ground when he saw the pig-headed butcher already in front of him, raising his large hook, almost piercing Wayne's flesh like a piglet. PFFT. Luckily, a bullet flew in from somewhere and hit the pig-headed butcher in the side chest. If we use the process of elimination, it was probably Inessa sniping from a distance outside the wall. The pig-headed butcher's movements faltered slightly, and Wayne quickly scrambled backward on all fours. Seeing the hole that had been blown open outside the dormitory next to him, Wayne didn't even have time to stand up straight before he accelerated and crawled inside. At this moment, Lena, seeing Wayne had moved a little further away, also helped by firing a shotgun shot, slowing down the pig-headed butcher's movements. Then Wayne crawled into the room of the dormitory, and immediately jumped out of the window, simultaneously loading a lever-action rifle. Behind him, a series of clanging and banging sounds filled the air. After a brief pause, the pig-headed butcher charged forward again, first enlarging the hole blasted in the wall, then smashing through the wall with the window along Wayne's path. Another demolition monster. Taking advantage of the pig-headed butcher's slightly reduced speed as he crashed into the wall, Wayne was already standing on the windowsill of the room 2 rooms away. As soon as the pig-headed butcher showed his face, Wayne fired a shot into his forehead. Bang! A chunk of the pig-headed butcher's head was gone. Ha ha ha, didn't expect that, did you? I have exorcism bullets too. The pig-headed butcher's movements hesitated slightly, then instead of lying down, he raised his big hook again. Exorcism bullets don't even work on the head. Wayne was shocked. Without thinking, he grabbed his gun, grabbed the windowsill, and jumped into the room. He passed the 2 men's corpses lying together, then kicked open the door and ran outside. Behind him, there was another series of clanging and banging noises. As Wayne ran, he gripped the exorcism bullet, trying to infuse the bullet with spiritual power, then circled back to the hole he'd just come from. Although Wayne had wanted to create a super powerful explosive bullet, charging, loading, and chambering it all took time, and the pig-headed butcher's chasing noise was getting louder. So, Wayne hastily loaded the exorcism bullet into the gun, which probably only contained about 20-30% of his current spiritual power. Just as the pig-headed butcher rounded the corner, bang, a bullet struck him squarely in the head. Then, boom, the entire pig's head was blown to pieces, the kind that could probably be arranged into a platter of braised meat. Ha! Wayne's lips had barely curled into a slight smile when he saw the headless butcher, after only a brief moment of stiffness, raise his massive hook again. His emotional roller coaster instantly plummeted. Wayne shook his head, sighed, and quickly continued running. Clutching his exorcism bullets again, he ducked back into the room. This time, a large hole had been breached in the wall, eliminating the need to even climb through the window. He then circled back to the 2 men's rooms, moving without hindrance. To Wayne's surprise, this time the headless butcher smashed through 2 walls, chasing him down in a straight line from the room next door. Wow! No head, so all you can do is walk in a straight line, huh? Well, you're in luck. After that, Wayne ran back and forth around the dormitory, while the headless butcher, like an emotionless bulldozer, rampaged through the wooden building. Some broken pieces of wood were embedded in its body, and even a large plank had been forced into its belly. But its speed, except for a slight slowdown when it hit the wall, remained constant. Wayne's most dangerous moment was when the outside of the large hook slashed his head. He felt a dizzy spell, and then blood flowed down to his eyes. But it wasn't a fatal wound. When the dormitory finally gave way and collapsed completely, Wayne managed to conjure a high explosive bullet with almost his maximum power. He looked around, then ran towards the large wooden house next to him, loading bullets into his lever-action rifle. The large wooden house was probably about the size of a basketball court. Wayne circled it, estimated the end of the headless butcher's path, and then waited at the corner with his gun. The headless butcher charged straight into the large wooden house, then burst through the wall again. Bang! Thud! The bullet exploded in the headless butcher's left chest. Its body instantly shattered into pieces. The left half of its body, directly hit, along with its spine and arm, was completely gone. The remaining legs and right arm also scattered in all directions. However, its right arm flew to Wayne's side, still stubbornly holding onto the large hook, repeatedly grappling at the ground like a fat worm, continuing to burrow towards Wayne. Wayne, at this point, had no temper left. Expressionless, he raised his foot and kicked the arm away, the hook finally separating from the arm in midair. Then, Wayne looked through the hole created by the headless butcher into the large wooden house. He saw 3 people dressed in white robes, positioned in a triangular shape, sitting on a huge magic circle. The 3 men were now lying on the ground, panting and coughing up blood. Wayne pondered for a moment, then pulled the lever of his lever-action rifle back and forth, and with a click, a bullet was chambered. Playing with the remote control, huh? I was wondering why that guy earlier didn't seem to need his head much. Chapter 68. Each gets what they need. After Wayne crawled through the hole into the large wooden house, the 3 men lying on the ground, who had seemed on the verge of death, actually launched a counterattack. They pointed at Wayne repeatedly and said something short and urgent. Then, in Wayne's minimalist vision, invisible, discontinuous short lines began to fall from the void above his head, seemingly about to strike him. Fortunately, their attack was locked onto the attack location, not locked onto the person directly. So Wayne dodged them several times and ended the fight with a series of bangs. He also finished off the attackers' heads and chests with exorcism bullets. As for the large magic circle beneath the 3 men in the wooden house, Wayne decided to show it to some professionals first. If they had no opinions, he would use high explosives to dispose of it. After confirming that no one else was in the wooden house, Wayne crawled out of the hole and began searching for the remaining enemies in the small village. Turning to the back of the large wooden house, Wayne found Lena, who had disappeared halfway there. Lena seemed to have just survived a fierce battle, her hands supporting her upper body as she slumped on the grass, resting. A little further away lay a scattered pile of bones. Dr. Lecter, whom Wayne had met on the other side of the village, had tidied his hair and clothes and was quickly dragging several corpses together in a row. One of the corpses, not yet grouped together, looked like it had been dead for at least a month or 2. In some places, bone was exposed, and in others, the flesh was so rotten it was almost falling off the bone, oozing a grayish-black liquid. After a quick count, if you included the few things that didn't look human, there were exactly 17 enemies in the village, no more, no less. Just to be safe, Wayne, gun in hand, patrolled the village again. Yes, there were indeed no other living people. After rummaging around, although the sun hadn't risen yet, it was already getting light. 21 horses, 15 relatively intact lever-action rifles, 20 pistols, a total of $2,760 in coins and banknotes, and we also found quite a few daily necessities like whiskey, but they're hard to carry. The group was now gathered inside the large wooden cabin, with a miserly Lena listing their spoils. Inessa was observing the large magic circle on the floor, while Dr. Lecter pulled out a thick notebook from somewhere and started drawing on it. Besides what Lena mentioned, they actually had 3 other finds: a small, not particularly hard, gray crystal, a small piece of gray bone with blood streaks, and a small, twitching, half-rotten chunk of flesh. These were all scavenged from the corpses or remains of the monsters they had just encountered. Dr. Lecter was very generous, stating that he wasn't interested in not quite fresh ingredients and wouldn't participate in the division. In exchange, he had to copy the magic circle in the large cabin before Wayne and his group could destroy it. According to Dr. Lecter, he was filled with curiosity about such unknown knowledge. So, a rough estimate showed that the supplies they could take, converted to cash, would be around $5,000. There wasn't anything particularly valuable, but since it was a raid, the main focus was on quantity. Just the fact that each of them had at least 1 horse added up to a considerable sum. This money was divided among the 6 people: Wayne, Inessa, Lena, Parker, Captain Harvey, and Dr. Lecter. Parker's share was then split equally among Wayne and his 2 companions. As for Captain Harvey, he simply won without contributing anything. However, considering he was currently a law-abiding citizen with a bright future, giving him a share was better than giving it to a bad guy. Consider it hush money. Wayne now understood better why Lena had said that targeting high bounty wanted criminals was too inefficient. Take William Bonney, for example, a top-tier wanted criminal with a $5,000 bounty. However, the preparations and anticipated dangers of taking him down were clearly far greater and more perilous than raiding a gang's stronghold. While raiding his stronghold would yield more, from a purely financial standpoint, dealing with ordinary gangs was safer and more efficient. This small stronghold was a place where anyone could easily be caught off guard and lose their life. Taking down a top-tier wanted criminal was certainly more dangerous. So, in the style of American superheroes, the group killed what they needed to kill, took what they needed to take, and finally burned down and blew up the villain's stronghold before starting their return journey. A long line of horses followed, each carrying a load, creating a rather spectacular scene. Captain Harvey woke up, utterly shocked. How did things suddenly turn out like this? What did I miss? Wayne patted him on the shoulder. Last night, there was a sneak attack. You seemed to wake up briefly, but were immediately knocked unconscious. So we were forced to fight back, stopping and starting along the way, and finally, without warning, we took down their hideout. Captain Harvey was clearly even more shocked, clutching his head with both hands. How is this possible? Wayne nodded. That's exactly how it is. You can ask them if you don't believe me. Then, a group of people around him nodded silently. Not only Dr. Lecter, a rational, neutral, and objective short-term member of the mounted police, agreed that Wayne was right. Captain Harvey might be suffering from short-term amnesia. Even the previously captured thug, after seeing the corpses being carried back as evidence, acknowledged that Wayne's version was the truth. Thus, with 5 votes in favor and 1 invalid vote, this version of the truth was approved. Take the hush money. You're not doing anything wrong, so don't make us look like we're sneaking around. We in the American Federation also have our own bullying culture, so you'd better watch out. Finally, after a day's journey, the two groups parted ways halfway. The county mounted police, according to the agreed-upon ratio, took 7 horses, some supplies, the corpses, and the prisoners. Wayne and his group, in their 4-wheel drive, began their journey back to Blackrock Town. The next day, on the way, they encountered Tecumseh and his people. Because Wayne had deliberately left behind the most valuable and easily convertible firearms and ammunition. So Tecumseh and his people were clearly very interested in the goods in Wayne's caravan. Tecumseh seemed to hesitate for a moment, then asked Wayne, "How about you sell us these guns and ammunition? As friends, we're willing to pay a discounted price in gold." "Where did you get your gold?" Wayne asked. Tecumseh hesitated even more, and after thinking for a long time, he pulled Wayne aside and whispered, "Actually, our tribe was forced to migrate here many years ago because the white people, I'm not targeting you, discovered gold mines near our original settlement, and then our people were driven here by the colonial army. The legend of the gold mines in this area was actually fabricated after our ancestors traded some of the nuggets they brought with them. Because we were worried that the white people would steal them, or that they didn't trust that there were no gold mines in our land, they launched another military campaign to drive us away. After that, we never dared to use them directly again, and we still have a small batch left." "Huh? So the reason our innocent villagers died was because they were fooled by a false legend? If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels." Chapter 69 Doghead Gold. The next morning, the 4-wheel drive returned to Blackrock Town alone. Wayne, carrying a bag of gold nuggets, went straight to the mayor's office. At that time, American gold coins were generally pegged to 90% gold content, with little actual deviation. For example, the large double eagle coin Wayne gave Lena, with a face value of $20 and a total weight of 1.075 troy ounces, had a gold content of 90%. It wasn't much different in gold content from the high-quality gold nuggets Tecumseh and his group had given him. Using units Wayne was more familiar with, it was roughly equivalent to 30 grams plus a little extra pure gold, worth about $20 at the time. However, Tecumseh gave Wayne a discount. The horses, guns, and ammunition were valued at a higher price, giving Wayne a total valuation of $3,800, while the gold nuggets were calculated based on only 80% of their weight. After some back and forth, Wayne's bag of gold nuggets was worth approximately $4,200. Compared to the original proportional distribution of supplies, this resale netted him about $900 more. Tecumseh and his group weren't exactly at a loss, since legally circulated firearms and ammunition, especially ammunition, wouldn't easily fall into the hands of the natives in large quantities. If calculated at the black market price for the natives, they were essentially getting a discount. It was a friendly price, really. The bag of gold nuggets Wayne held weighed over 7 kilograms, but in terms of volume, if it were all melted down and recast, it would be about the size of a can of cola. It felt quite heavy in his hand. After greeting the mayor, Wayne went into his office, silently took out a gold nugget, placed it on the desk, and showed it to the mayor. The mayor picked up the gold nugget, weighed it briefly in his hand, then picked up a letter opener and gently ran it across the surface. Finally, he looked up at Wayne. This was seized from criminals? The quality is quite good, it must be a rare find. Would you like me to exchange it for gold coins or equivalent banknotes? In America these days, if you sent gold nuggets or foreign coins to the mint, they would melt them down or exchange them for equivalent American gold coins free of charge. However, sending the items to the mint itself still cost money, at least in terms of travel expenses. The mayor's willingness to exchange it directly was already saving Wayne time and money. But Wayne didn't intend to do so. I want to sell these gold nuggets, or use them as capital for investment. Sell or reinvest? The mayor frowned slightly. Are you in a real hurry for money? You've spent all the savings your parents and Benjamin left you? The land you own is located between the planned steam train station and the town, and our town will officially become a city within the next year or two. That area has the potential to develop into a core area. Their future appreciation potential is huge, and I personally strongly advise against selling them now. Of course, if you're sure you want to sell now, I can try to contact some large landowners for you. Considering the expected completion of the new steam train station in 2 years, and the potential for land price increases in the medium term, I should be able to get you a good premium. Wayne quickly shook his head, placing a whole bag of gold nuggets on the mayor's desk. Actually, I wanted to sell them to you, Mayor. Or consider it an investment. We can calculate the price at $4,500. The mayor looked at the sturdy leather bag, toying with the gold nuggets in his hand. While this quality of gold nuggets is indeed quite rare, what can I do with them? Wayne's eyes darted around slightly. We can bury it in the ground and then have someone dig it up. In his previous life, Wayne wasn't particularly knowledgeable about the development history of North America on Earth, but he did have some basic understanding of some of the landmark events. For example, one of the key factors that greatly boosted the westward migration and rapidly spurred the development of Western industries was the so-called gold rush. The discovery of a gold nugget sparked a gold rush that lasted for at least a decade. It's said that, according to incomplete statistics, gold mining alone attracted at least 300,000 new immigrants from all over the Americas and even overseas to California. This subsequently made California the most populous state in the U.S. at the time. Therefore, after acquiring these natural, high-quality gold nuggets, Wayne, who owned land and was waiting for its value to appreciate, immediately wanted to make the most of them. This world hasn't started a gold rush yet? Then it might be about to begin. The mayor's reaction was quick. An interesting look immediately appeared on his face. You mean, we should publicize that there's a gold mine in Blackrock Town, and then attract free people to settle there? Wayne pondered for a moment, then turned and walked towards a map of America hanging on the wall of the mayor's office. Considering the huge impact on public order if gold prospectors flock in, and the fact that they might leave quickly after finding no gold, leaving only a mess. So perhaps we can take a roundabout approach. Wayne finally pointed to the West Coast area on the map of America. We can claim that these nuggets of gold were discovered in California or Nevada, or even have someone bury some. Anyway, Kansas is located in the middle of the North American continent, and Blackrock Town is now the terminus of this steam train line. As long as a certain number of travelers pass through, it will be enough for us to develop the economy. And those who are willing to stay on the way there or back will be more stable residents. As for whether there are actually gold mines on the west coast of the American Federation in this world, let others try their luck. According to Wayne's memory, the profits from panning for gold from small, scattered gold deposits weren't actually that substantial. However, if a large gold vein was discovered, ordinary people who thought they could hold on to such a sudden windfall were simply naive. The mayor walked over to Wayne, his eyes gleaming as he looked at the map on the wall. This seems feasible. No, I think it's highly feasible. And it would be very beneficial for the long-term development of Blackrock Town. After speaking, the mayor patted Wayne's shoulder twice, then turned and walked to his desk, grabbed some things, seemingly preparing to leave $4,500, right? I'll go discuss this with a few big landowners. If they agree, including this idea, I can try to get you $5,000. Be careful to keep this a secret, don't reveal the true origin of these things. Thank you for finding the bugs and for the reader's corrections. I'm feeling a bit sweaty. By the way, I just discovered this book has over 10,000 favorites. Thank you guys for liking it. Chapter 70 Gray Crystal. As soon as Wayne got home, Lena's head popped out of the kitchen. How's it going? Did your method for increasing the value of those gold nuggets work? Wayne's gaze was disdainful. He first held up 4 fingers, giving Lena a 4, then a 5. The price of $4,500 was already confirmed by the mayor. As for the total amount of $5,000, that would have to wait for the mayor to fight for it. Yo-ho. Lena raised her hands high at the kitchen doorway, then slammed the back of one hand against the door frame with a thud. She quickly withdrew her hand, turned her head to glare at the door frame, snorted, and retreated back into the kitchen. Wayne had previously discussed with Inessa and Lena that if they weren't in a hurry to cash out the gold nuggets, he could try to increase their value again. However, if Wayne was in a hurry to cash out, he would have to use a portion of the $4,200 he had already secured to cover the cost. Inessa didn't seem particularly eager for the cash, while Lena decisively chose the option with a larger share, so Wayne took all the gold nuggets. Fortunately, he didn't fail in his mission. In fact, while Wayne was devising his idea of launching a gold rush ahead of schedule, Lena had provided valuable information. She had actually asked the wise sage where there were unclaimed gold mines in the United States. Lena pointed west, saying, "The sage indicated there are gold mines in that direction." Wayne was speechless. "Lena, you dare ask a deity or evil god like that? Aren't you afraid they won't reply, or even curse you?" Wayne, curious, then asked, "Why don't you keep asking? Even if he only responds once a month, if you ask a few more times and pinpoint a few directions, you might actually find it." Lena, a little unhappy about this, replied, "I did ask. But to get a response from the sage, the question has to be concise. I asked where there were unclaimed gold mines, and the sage immediately pointed me in several directions. They were everywhere, densely packed, but I only knew the densest was in the southwest. I asked where the largest gold mine nearby was, and once the sage led me to a bank's vault. How am I supposed to dig there? This wise sage seems reliable, yet also quite unreliable. Anyway, the treasure is probably somewhere out there. Those who want it should go find it." Wayne followed Lena into the kitchen, wanting to see what she was busy with. Previously, the group had obtained 3 extraordinary materials in that small village: a small, not particularly hard, gray crystal, a small piece of gray bone with blood streaks, and a small, twitching, semi-rotten chunk of flesh. Wayne chose the gray crystal he found in the butcher's meat. Lena chose the half-rotten chunk of flesh that had fallen from a zombie and occasionally throbbed like a heart. And finally, Inessa took the piece of gray bone with bright red, writhing blood streaks. Peter was currently slurping the chunk of flesh from his plate at the table, while Lena was stirring the soup pot at the stove with a large spoon, occasionally adding things as if checking the heat. A small patch of gray steam, sometimes thick, sometimes thin, rose above the pot, as if countless silhouettes of vengeful spirits were flashing through it, emanating an ominous aura. Wayne peered into the pot, where a strange smell and color emanated from it. "What are you doing?" Wayne asked. Inessa's voice came from behind him. "I'm brewing a potion using that bone from before. Based on the decaying nature of death, it can be used to weaken the bindings the Holy Spirit Church left on me. Moreover, the realms of death and holiness are actually opposites. Depending on the usage and specific circumstances, they can be nourishment for each other or forces that cancel each other out. It's more effective at weakening the bindings of the Holy Spirit Church than for other realms." I see. But speaking of this, Wayne thought about the undigested fluid in his stomach, the spiritual power from the dark realm that I absorbed from the Tecumseh people. Although I feel its influence isn't as great now, it's still digesting very slowly. I haven't digested much yet. How can I digest them as quickly as possible? Inessa answered almost without hesitation. The source of those powers should be the evil spirit that was fed in the cave before, and it was even specialized, deeply influenced by the residual will of a higher-level evil spirit. Since you can absorb them without any signs of mutation or loss of control, it means that the level of your own spiritual power source is high enough that it won't be affected by the residual will. The slow absorption and stagnation are because your current level is not high enough. So you can try drinking more holy water for a while. Although this will offset some of their spiritual power, it should also make the absorption faster. Holy water is really useful. I didn't expect it could be used as a seasoning when eating meat, and it can also aid digestion. No wonder Inessa said something like drinking more holy water will be fine at the beginning. Wayne, drawing inferences from this, suddenly thought of the gray crystal he had been allocated. If I eat that crystal and it doesn't digest, can drinking more holy water solve the problem? Inessa looked at Wayne, slightly taken aback. Unless it's a holy domain, it's best to drink less holy water. The characteristic of holy domain power is repulsion, and the body's internal defenses are weaker than the skin. Even if it's not a domain it targets, drinking it day after day can eventually cause problems for your body. Eating too much spicy food hurts your stomach. It's not good for your health, I know. Wayne returned to his room with a great crystal, first taking a swig of holy water to aid digestion of the fluid in his stomach, then opening his eyes to absorb the spiritual power within the crystal. Although he didn't taste it directly, Wayne seemed to still detect a slight saltiness. However, while the pig-headed butcher seemed to have a substantial amount, the actual spiritual power contained in the grey crystal extracted from him was only average. More than the 5 dogs of the fluttering moth, but less than the 10 dogs of the mutated Vajra, probably around 7 dogs, no more. So the blue bar continued to rise slightly, remaining generally flat. But just as Wayne stood up, leaning on the table, and was about to take the shattered grey crystal to the trash, the slight saltiness in his mouth suddenly became overwhelmingly cloying. Wayne suddenly felt a wave of dizziness, as if a cold, eerie voice was whispering in his ear, "Ah, I found you." Chapter 71 News. Wayne went downstairs and told Inessa and Lena what had happened. The 2 seasoned drivers reacted rather indifferently. Lena was lounging lazily on Inessa's bed, flipping through a picture book, while Peter the spider scurried around the bed, using his long, slender forelegs to carry blackberries one by one from the fruit bowl on the bedside table and feed them to her. So her response was equally nonchalant, "Since they say they've found you, just wait for them to come to you. If they're a newbie, then there's no need to worry. If they're really good, then worrying won't help." Inessa sat at a nearby table, seemingly drawing a pre-prepared potion into syringes. The potion was now a clear, pale gray liquid. As Inessa carefully put the 2 syringes into her bag, she answered Wayne's question. The extraordinary aspect of extraordinary individuals is that they may possess different abilities. Some abilities may be rare and unique, even so bizarre that they cannot be predicted in advance. But we can be clear about one thing: before their rank rises and they transform into extraordinary beings like so-called evil gods, demons, or angels, the essence of an extraordinary being remains human. To use something familiar as an example, an extraordinary being might be similar to someone wielding different tools. A horseman runs faster, a spearman shoots farther, a torchbearer provides light, and so on. Different abilities allow for different actions, but that doesn't necessarily mean greater combat strength. The one who seeks you out might be the creator of that pig-headed butcher. Perhaps it's because his ability allows him to leave a mark on his spiritual power, thus pinpointing your location when you absorb and devour that spiritual power. But it could also simply be a message or conversation. It depends on his specific abilities. So Lena's right. Whether you're the hunter or the prey, you'll only know once you actually encounter them. By this time, Wayne had already noticed the benefits of his contact with a hunter association. Of course, this might just be a personal trait of the academically gifted and beautiful Inessa. They seemed quite adept at deconstructing the mystery. If it were someone more mystical, they would probably be talking to Wayne about theological or philosophical topics like prayer, atonement, blessing, or protection. But Inessa would only tell you, you can fight this, run that, and then explain why you can fight and why you have to run. She had a kind of unyielding and unified attitude towards the world. In a world where many people seem to need to find something to believe in, she seemed quite heretical. I liked it. And since they were already there, Inessa temporarily sent Lena away and began to review and comment on Wayne's actions. From a novice hunter's perspective, I think Wayne, your performance can be described as excellent. Perhaps it's a difference in fighting style, but you seem to be better at adapting to changing circumstances, making better use of the environment, and also have the awareness to finish off targets to confirm they're completely dead. 2 things deserve extra credit. One is that you weren't injured after the successful hunt, which is usually very important, but considering my general understanding of your abilities, this only gets a small bonus. The other is that you quickly detected the accomplice who was giving the prey a spiritual boost and dealt with him promptly. This is quite remarkable, showing your keen combat instincts. I was just looking for a place to bang my head against that pig's head. It feels like I just happened to guess the bonus question correctly. I'm happy, but not particularly happy. And then, the annoying thing about the academic genius suddenly came up in my mind with Wayne. Inessa gave Wayne her assessment, based on my observations over this period, I think you've already developed the basic ability to hunt alone. The rest mainly depends on accumulating and summarizing experience. So if that mastermind behind the scenes comes knocking, I think you should be able to roughly judge whether to hunt first or stay away. Perhaps you can even take care of him outright. You've already learned 1 + 1 = 2, now let's start calculating calculus. Hey, I'm still just a primary school student, okay? I can still be guided. That night, Wayne went fishing at the tavern. Actually, patrolling the tavern was part of the sheriff's routine work for maintaining order. However, most of the time, what the sheriff needed to do in the town wasn't to kill bad guys. Rather, it was something like, when free citizens or townspeople were arguing, stepping in and saying, "Everyone, calm down." In terms of gender alone, those who appeared in the tavern these days were mostly men, or, to be slightly more precise, those born with Dick in their names. The rest, besides the tavern girls, were occasionally someone's companions or female companions. Tavern girls weren't directly equivalent to professional women who provided adult experiences. They generally entertained customers through entertainment like singing, chatting, or dancing. There might be part-timers, but for special services, there were actually more specialized places. So when Wayne walked into the tavern with Lena in a red dress, Uncle Sam even whistled and raised an eyebrow at Wayne, subtly conveying, "You're something else." Thanks to the steam train, the tavern wasn't just full of locals, many were actually unfamiliar faces from out of town. So when they saw Wayne wasn't wearing his badge, aside from a few familiar faces who greeted him, most of the townspeople tacitly ignored him. Aside from lending a hand when needed or casting a vote in elections, everyone usually went their own way. It was currently the tavern's busiest time, and a barmaid was singing for everyone. Wayne and Lena sat down at the bar, and a stranger next to them pointed at them and handed 2 coins to the bartender. "Tony, buy these 2 newcomers a drink." This wasn't an abrupt attempt at conversation. In many small western towns with a large number of visitors, it was common to hear this unwritten rule: the first customer to sit at the bar would buy a drink for the next person who arrived and sat next to them. Then the next person would continue this tradition. In the West, where newspapers weren't readily available, pubs, besides being places for casual entertainment, were primarily places for people to socialize and exchange information. Following this unwritten rule seemed to demonstrate one's familiarity with the rules, and also made it easier to quickly build rapport with strangers. So Wayne and Lena accepted the drinks Tony offered, smiled, raised their glasses to the strangers, and said, "Thank you." Seeing that Wayne and Lena accepted their friendliness, the stranger then began to speak formally. "Have you heard? It seems that after Kankers officially became a state, they're going to ban slavery." Chapter 72 Honest Man. In this other history that Wayne wasn't very familiar with, he remembered that the North and South of the United States had been locked in a decade-long struggle over the legality of slavery. During this time, the two sides took turns in power, their influence shifting, and various laws were passed that contradicted each other. The United States in this world, however, adopted a direct self-government act. This meant that whether a newly established state became a free state or a slave state would be decided solely by a referendum held by the residents at the time of its official establishment. There was no slave demarcation line as defined in the other world. Although the timelines of the two worlds were clearly different, shouldn't the development of history have a similar basic process? Here, the gold rush hadn't even started yet, so why were they suddenly discussing emancipating slaves? Wayne pondered for a moment, then, looking at the unfamiliar face, he suddenly realized the official establishment of Kankers as a state was a crucial and important event for those aspiring to political power. The mayor wouldn't keep this kind of news from Wayne. On the contrary, he'd likely mobilize Wayne to campaign for him in advance. So, if the mayor received the news through his powerful friends and then promptly relayed it to Wayne, it would probably be almost certainly true. But now, Wayne overheard a stranger casually mentioning such important information in a tavern, and the person even specifically pointed out the keyword ban on slavery. The answer is obvious: someone is spreading rumors in advance. It's likely that the major slave owners believe Kanks will officially become a state within the next year or two and have already begun preparations. In the West, where even newspapers aren't widely circulated and timely, nothing influences public opinion more effectively than sending people to taverns in various towns to deliberately spread one-sided information. So, Wayne smiled and chatted with a person for a while, and the person indeed detailed the various benefits of slavery. For example, With slaves around, the free people wouldn't have to do the hard farm work, the free people's rights and status would be higher than the slaves, and there would be no need to worry about the slaves spreading heretical beliefs like voodoo by virtue of their numbers. Anyway, he went on and on. And you know what? After listening to his spiel, even Wayne felt a little tempted. Then Wayne thought about it and decided he should reciprocate this temptation, so he moved a little closer to the stranger and lowered his voice. I also have a secret message. I'm only telling you this because you bought us drinks. You probably haven't heard, have you? Someone found gold mines on the West Coast, in California and Nevada. The other person immediately perked up. Gold mines. SHH. Wayne put his index finger to his lips. It might be a huge gold mine. They say that even if you just sift through the sand in the entire riverbed nearby, you can find gold dust. If you don't believe me, stay in town for a few more days. I heard someone has already brought back a whole chest of gold nuggets, and the quality is excellent. They've become rich overnight. Then, taking advantage of the man's shifty eyes, Wayne patted him on the shoulder, his expression serious. This news is still a secret. I don't tell just anyone. You remember to keep it a secret too. Otherwise, too many people will go panning for gold, and we won't have a chance to get rich. Seeing that the other person was clearly also interested, Wayne finished his watered-down whiskey, bought another drink for the next customer, and then left the tavern with Lena. Wayne then deliberately went their separate ways home, even taking a longer route, but no one attacked him. Even Inessa, who arrived last, shook her head, indicating that no one was following Wayne. TCH, that voice that whispered in Wayne's ear earlier, clearly said found you, but where is she after Wayne's been wandering around all night? Are there hardly any honest people in all of America? Disappointed, everyone lined up to boil water. After finally taking a bath, Wayne gulped down some holy water to aid digestion and was about to go to bed for a good night's sleep when his spiritual intuition suddenly reacted. His vision, defined by simple lines, opened up, and several tiny figures outlined by lines flew closer, landing in a row on the balcony railing outside the window. It looked like a flock of birds. But their shapes were only outlined by short, broken lines, making Wayne sigh. This whole Blackrock Town, why do they have to pick on my house to fight, he thought. Silently, he picked up his revolver and holy water bottle, placed them beside him, and started getting dressed. Just as Wayne pulled up his pants, the flock of dead birds began crashing into the window. First, there was a loud crash as the lead blackbird shattered the glass. Then came a series of clattering sounds, and a large, dark swarm suddenly rushed towards Wayne. These things looked like crows that had been dead for 10 days or 2 weeks, or so they seemed. Anyway, they were covered in black feathers, some had exposed bones, some were still dripping with fluid, and they reeked of decay. Bang! Wayne fired a shot first, but found it ineffective. Having nothing else at hand, he hastily tucked his pistol behind his waist, then pulled up the covers and shoved the dead birds inside. They were surprisingly strong, struggling and pushing the covers back up. Wayne then stomped on the floor beside the bed through the covers while repeatedly swinging a pillow to shoo away the remaining birds that tried to peck at his head. The birds flew everywhere, but quickly returned to retaliate. Taking advantage of the situation, he unscrewed the holy water bottle, gulped it down, and then sprayed it directly at the birds that were fluttering back, then shoved each one with a pillow. The holy water vaporized on the birds. Wayne sprayed another mouthful, infused the bottle with spiritual power, and then slammed it against the arching covers. He didn't even bother to check if the bottle had actually made a thud. Dodging a dead bird that tried to peck at his eyes, Wayne reached for a spare bottle of holy water. Seeing 3 dead birds swooping down on him, Wayne dodged to the door, pulled it shut, and heard several loud thuds from inside. Luckily, the birds couldn't break through the door. Just as Wayne thought this, he suddenly felt something attack his ear. He tilted his head, and a dead bird, which had somehow been knocked out the door, whizzed past his face, instantly causing a stinging pain as if his skin had been cut. Just then, Inessa and Lena arrived with their weapons, and they saw Wayne grab the dead bird, twist it with a snap, and slam it to the floor. They were furious. Did that guy have to play like this? Fine. Chapter 73 The Puritans. For Wayne, home, at least his bedroom, was like a safe zone in this world. No matter how dangerous it was outside, back here, he at least had a place where he could sleep peacefully, in a way he believed was safe. Unfortunately, this false sense of security had now been punctured like a bubble. The enemies active raiding his home, while rationally understandable, still broke his defenses. He couldn't forgive them. So, in Wayne's mind, it was as if two little voices were talking. One, representing the villain, said, "We deliberately stayed out all night, and this bastard wouldn't come. Now he insists on raiding our home. Damn it, let's beat him up." The other little voice said, "Okay, okay, okay." After helping to roughly clean up the scene, Ms. Inessa, now like a seductive devil, was gently persuading Wayne, "Now that you have a suitable target, an extraordinary from the death realm who seems to have deep ties to the gang, you can try using a hunter's mindset to hunt. First, how much do we know about our prey?" Wayne thought for a moment. He's an extraordinary from the death realm, capable of creating or manipulating undead monsters like the pig-headed butcher in tonight's group of dead birds. He can also directly sense the enemy's location and transmit messages through spiritual power. Ms. Inessa continued giddingly, "Recently, we've encountered several different types of enemies. Which type do you think his attack tonight falls into? Did he use an extraordinary ritual relying on spiritual power, or did he inquire about special power from a higher being, or perhaps he simply used his own extraordinary ability?" Wayne pondered for a moment. "If I had to guess, since he came seeking revenge, he wouldn't have had much time to prepare. So he either simply used extraordinary abilities, or he used a simple magic circle or something. I don't know much about that." "Very good." Teacher Inessa continued to guide. "After entering the second tier, you should have a basic understanding of the abilities of extraordinary individuals. They are usually not very numerous, and there are corresponding restrictions when using them. They are not as extraordinary as they seem. Similarly, ritual magic circles also have various restrictions on their use. For example, they require specific rituals, a source of spiritual power, key materials, and so on. Assuming his rank is slightly higher than yours, and we already know the effects of his domain and several abilities, what kind of combat style would he likely have?" Wayne extrapolated from his own experience. If he had similar abilities, he'd probably be a formidable opponent. He's likely an ambush type who creates traps, or a sneak attack type who creates undead monsters. His direct combat abilities are unclear, but I don't think he'd be very good at it. Inessa continued, "How far is he from us right now?" This question was simple, and Wayne answered without hesitation. He should be within the territory of Blackrock Town, maybe even in the town itself. While it's not a hard and fast rule, the previous Divine Messenger had such a large local magic array for power, yet the insect monster's remote control distance wasn't particularly far. It's impossible for a dragon crossing the river to carry a nuclear power plant over and assemble it so quickly, right? Ms. Inessa nodded. "Now that we've roughly determined the type of attack and the location, what other characteristics might he have?" This kind of analysis was something Wayne had been good at lately, so he immediately made a whole list. He just said he found me during the day, and then launched the attack tonight. So he wasn't too far from Blackrock Town before. So he's probably an outsider who found me today after his hideout was raided, and rushed here temporarily. He might have only recently arrived in Blackrock Town, which is why he doesn't have an alibi tonight. If he hasn't fled the town yet, then he'll need to find a place to stay or hide temporarily in the next few days. Those dead birds smelled so bad, he couldn't have just carried them around. He must have had something to put them in or some bird-catching device, so he must have had luggage, but he might have abandoned it along the way. Wayne slapped his thigh. Did we miss our chance to chase him? Inessa shook her head. We don't even know if his ability is direct manipulation or target locking, so we can't confirm the range or which direction he's in. We can't chase him. Then Inessa added, although the possibility is small, he could also be a resident of your town. But anyway, since he attacked you the very night he located you, it means his hostility towards you is quite strong. He didn't succeed this time, and I guess he might try to attack you again soon. The exact time interval depends on how long it takes for his spiritual power to recover or for him to prepare for the attack. But I estimate, if things go smoothly, it might be within a few days. Wayne's eyes darted around slightly. How about we go camping for the next few nights? The next day, just as dawn broke, the four-wheel drive vehicle drove out of Wayne's yard. As usual, Wayne strolled around the police station. Just as he was about to write a message with a plaster marker outside the station gate, the mayor's carriage pulled up beside him. The mayor waved to Wayne from inside the carriage, and as soon as Wayne approached, a small box was handed to him. This is what we promised to get for you. Things are already being arranged, the mayor said briefly and subtly, giving Wayne a knowing look. Okay, Wayne nodded, casually hefting the small box in his hand. It wasn't heavy, and it was rather empty. It was probably full of banknotes. Judging from the mayor's words, the $5,000 should be in hand. Then Wayne reported to the mayor, "By the way, Mayor, I haven't had much to do these past few days. Aside from my daily patrols during the day, I don't stay home at night. If anyone needs to find me, I'll probably be spending the night in the fields around town. There might be a campfire, it shouldn't be too hard to find me." The mayor nodded, then looked at Inessa in the driver's seat of the four-wheel drive, and then at Lena, who was peeking out of the back of the vehicle, eyeing the small box in Wayne's hand. He suddenly sighed. "Ah, youth is wonderful. I had those days too, it's so nostalgic." "It's not what you think. And aren't you a self-proclaimed Puritan? How come you were so wild when you were young?" Chapter 74 Monster. Wow. After the mayor left, Lena took the small box from the four-wheel drive and eagerly opened it, letting out a satisfied exclamation. The small box was somewhat similar to the precursor to a modern briefcase, and its capacity wasn't small. However, it only contained a few stacks of banknotes, all printed with two-color ink, black on the front and red on the back. Wayne glanced at them. They were banknotes issued by a Louisiana bank, $10 notes, all brand new. They were considered a relatively high-denomination banknote that held its value well at the time. In those days, banknotes were mainly issued by licensed state or private banks. Therefore, there were all sorts of styles, and even recognizing money had almost become a skill. However, this small problem obviously didn't stump Lena. After roughly confirming their authenticity, she started counting the money like a silly girl, laughing as she did so. A total of $5,000. The banknotes were finally divided into 3 small stacks, some with smaller amounts, and the top stack even included coins that had been deliberately swapped out. Since Inessa hadn't directly participated in the battle, she took the stack with one less dollar. Then, Lena let out a whoosh, and tossed her share of the banknotes into the air in the carriage, watching them fall from the sky, feeling incredibly happy. Wayne and Inessa watched Lena's silly antics. How to describe it? It was like having a friend eating heartily next to you while you're eating. Even though you didn't actually eat much more, your happiness seemed to have increased. It was just that Lena's subsequent actions of picking up the money one by one in the carriage, afraid of missing anything, made her look a little flustered. Wayne's house actually had a hidden safe, a huge one buried in the cellar, the kind that wouldn't necessarily explode even if it were warped. However, since Wayne's house had recently been targeted by some unknown individual, trying to access the safe now might allow some strange ability to see the combination, making them a target for thieves. So, with their guns in their own, the group decided to keep all the money on them for the time being. Let them try and rob them if they dare. Peter, for example, was clinging to Lena's fanny pack, baring his teeth even when Lena tried to reach for it. After dividing the money, Wayne had planned his usual morning stroll around town when a townsman reported a missing cow. Simple thefts were beyond the town sheriff's jurisdiction, mainly due to limited manpower. Therefore, so-called minor offenses usually required the victims to investigate themselves or even arrest the suspect and report it. But this theft was unusual. The missing cow was found dead in a grove of trees not far from the farm, its intestines ripped open and its body covered in wounds, as if attacked by some monster. It seemed they had no choice but to investigate. So the four-wheel drive turned around and started chasing the farmer. This guy was quite superstitious. After consulting the sheriff, he also went to Reverend Huck, and finally, the group headed out of town together. Upon arriving at the scene, even Reverend Huck and Wayne immediately noticed something was wrong. The cow was pitifully dead, its body covered in bite marks from sharp teeth and claws, and its back riddled with peck marks. Reverend Huck, being properly trained, followed tradition and procedure, first purifying the scene before going to bless the believer. He also conveniently told them that the marks were actually from multiple wild animals that had attacked it. Although the rancher was somewhat skeptical, the pastor was clearly the greater authority in this matter, and with Wayne and a few others present expressing their approval, he had no choice but to follow Inessa's instructions and prepare to dig a hole to bury the cow. The death of a cow would be a devastating blow to an ordinary farming family in ancient China. However, in a farm in Kansas, the impact was much less significant. The United States is now sparsely populated, and Kansas is one of the major beef-producing regions in the country, where beef is inexpensive, even considered a bargain. The rancher already had a large herd of cattle, all bred by himself, so his losses were mainly in terms of time and labor costs. These days, the best way to convert beef into cash was to sell it to cattle dealers, who would then first reach coastal port cities before crossing the ocean to the Old World. Although the beef shipped over this way was still cheaper than beef raised domestically in the Old World, its price was significantly higher than in America. Especially in recent years, with the Old World countries experiencing intermittent warfare, the shortage of various industrial and agricultural products had to be filled through imports, making it a prosperous year for America with no worries about sales. Therefore, even the rancher whose cow died was primarily worried about the fear of the monster, and the occasional loss of 1 or 2 cows wasn't exactly insignificant, but not a major problem either. While the rancher was digging a hole, Ms. Inessa began posing a thought-provoking question to Wayne. "What do you think about this?" Wayne glanced again at the small eyes pecked out on the cow's back. Their size and dimensions matched, leading him to believe they were the work of the dead birds that attacked him last night. He pondered for a moment. "I think it was the person who attacked me last night. If this guess is correct, then he's basically an outsider. Moreover, those dead birds weren't something that guy made on the spot yesterday, they were things he brought with him. And he brought other things too. Judging from the fact that they need to be fed, those dead birds and monsters seem to need replenishment of flesh and blood. In other words, they might not be disposable items, at least they need charging or maintenance, making them might not be that easy. Once they're gone, they might be gone for a while." Inessa seemed satisfied with Wayne's performance, nodding and adding, "Being able to bring these undead creatures with him also means that his control over them might not require ritual arrays. He's the type who can attack at any time. However, bringing undead creatures with you is a very risky thing. This might also suggest that his own combat ability might not be very strong." "Got it, he's the type who needs to capture the leader first." Thinking about this, Wayne suddenly felt that the other party's ability seemed somewhat similar to Lena's. He glanced at Peter and figured that while its food seemed better, it was probably no different from those dead birds. Peter, who was masquerading as a decoration on Lena's fanny pack, noticed Wayne's gaze and raised a long, slender front leg, making a poke gesture towards Wayne. "Wow. You two really do have similar personalities." Chapter 75 Wendigo. At noon, everyone ate lunch together at the rancher's house. In Kansas, lunch was usually a simple affair, a so-called light meal. Even so, the rancher's generous portions of meat sandwiches, more meat than bread, and the virtually unlimited homemade cheese served after the meal were a luxury that, compared to the Kingdom of Windsor in the Old World, would be considered a daily indulgence for at least a middle-class family. This was one of the attractions that drew large numbers of immigrants from ordinary families to the American West. Thanks to its vast, sparsely populated plains, the settlers' food supply was generally plentiful and abundant in years with good security and minimal natural disasters. Becoming extremely wealthy was difficult, but simply wanting to eat more meat, eggs, and dairy every day was much easier than working in a factory in one of the Old World's powerful nations. However, this kind of life is currently only available when one is settled down. On journeys through the desolate wilderness, far from any village or shop, most people still have to resort to eating hard bread, the kind of bread that makes your temples ache from chewing. After lunch, the two carriages traveled side by side on the road back to town, the horses pacing leisurely ahead. Reverend Hark, in the driver's seat of the carriage next to the other, spoke to the other carriage. "So, Wayne, you've been targeted by the Fallen again?" Wayne, on the other side, was tidying up the 2 bottles of holy water Reverend Hark had just given him. The holy water Reverend Hark brought was indeed high grade, even spicier than the holy water Inessa had prepared herself. Comparatively, it was relatively more potent to drink. Hearing Reverend Harker ask this, Wayne slightly corrected him. "I'm not just being targeted, that guy was probably a member or leader of a gang, and now he's trespassing and attempting murder in revenge. According to the current laws of the New World, he'll be hanged at least twice." Reverend Harker nodded slightly. Being a sheriff isn't easy. But public figures really need to be prepared to be targets of thugs, not just hide in the shadows. Wayne nodded. "So Reverend Harker, you're so close to me now, you might get attacked by that guy in the next few days, you need to be careful too." Reverend Harker shrank back, then chuckled. "Even if that fallen one is insane, he wouldn't attack a church, would he?" Wayne turned to look at him, expressionless and silent. Reverend Harker's smile froze slightly. "Not really, right? This cattle theft case today is truly impossible to investigate. The perpetrator didn't even take the stolen goods. Instead, they destroyed them nearby. We tried having Peter act as a tracking dog, but he barely walked a few steps from the cow's carcass before starting to scratch his head with his front paws. However, not far away, we found what seemed like suspicious tire tracks and footprints. It hadn't rained for the past few days, so most footprints were faint, only vaguely indicating that someone had waited there for a short time. And once the tire tracks reached the main road, they couldn't be followed. But at least we could reasonably assume the perpetrator had a means of transportation. Fortunately, today's case seems to match the guy who attacked Wayne last night. So it seems we don't need to investigate further, we can just wait for them to come to us. After patrolling the area, we took Pastor Hack back to church. Then went home to rest briefly. Those who needed to wash up were given time to do so, and the four-wheel drive left the town after nightfall. We didn't dare go too far. They were worried that the other party might attract a large number of wild animals like wolves or brown bears, which would be troublesome. They lit a campfire in the wild, roasted some meat, and cooked a pot of mixed vegetable soup. After extinguishing the fire, they moved to another location with their dinner before finally eating. They could have eaten at home beforehand, but Wayne and his group planned to scout out the person attempting the attack every night for the next few days, changing locations randomly to prevent the attacker from preparing an ambush. Since they had nothing else to do that night, they decided to have a picnic. Unfortunately, nothing happened that night. The next day, they went back to check their house, making sure their attempt to scout the person hadn't backed into a raid or a trap. Fortunately, none of the prearranged traps showed any signs of tampering. It wasn't until late on the third night that Wayne, on his shift, saw the bright full moon rise high in the sky. Judging that it was about time, he slowly drove to another location. Then the monster brought by the attacker suddenly revealed its true form beside the carriage, a humanoid monster so thin it was practically skin and bones, with a wide upper body frame, long arms, and enormous claws. It looked somewhat like a zombie, but cleaner, at least not dripping with dregs or anything like that. If the swarm of insectoid monsters created by the second divine messenger only looked like the Wendigo, a monster unique to North America, then this monster seemed to be the genuine American-made Wendigo. At this moment, the monster was on all fours, its back arched, its hind legs bent, and its forelegs ridiculously large, like a beast poised to pounce. It seemed to be an agile creature. Ow! The Wendigo howled towards the carriage, its volume not low, but its tone not particularly sharp, somewhat like a broken voice singing. The horse's hooves trembled slightly, immediately becoming restless. Bang! Inessa had already raised her specially made bolt-action rifle and fired a shot at the spot where the Wendigo was crouching. The Wendigo quickly swayed to the side, seemingly unaffected. Its movements were like the jerky, frame-dropping graphics Wayne had seen in video games. One moment it moved incredibly fast, the next it was almost motionless. It created a disjointed, unsettling feeling. Wayne saw the Wendigo's ridiculously large forelimbs lower again, as if about to pounce once more, and he unleashed a burst of fire from his lever-action rifle, creating a trail of dust and craters in the ground between the carriage and the Wendigo. Lena beside him gave the reins a sharp tug, giddy up, and the four-wheel drive immediately accelerated from zero, determined not to fight them in the spot they had chosen. End of this chapter. Thank you so much for reading until the end. Don't forget to give it a like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription or donation encourages us to continue. Thank you all, see you in the next video.